Welcome into another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of HockeyRoyalty.com. Tonight is tinfoil hat season. We are getting down with the salary cap, going over the extension for Jim Hiller, talking about the status of where we sit in the salary cap, and then it's time to talk about trades, talking about signing people, putting the tinfoil hat on for a good solid hour. Buckle up. Let's go. Get in the chat. Like and subscribe. Let's get this shindig started. How are you doing, my co-hosts Joe and Russell? Welcome in.
I'm doing good. It's I'm excited for this one. This should be a fun show. Oh, Joe's muted.
Joe, you're on mute, buddy.
You should think I would figure this out by now. Between work and this, that's like
we should be like professionals by now, right? We should
amateur hour.
This out.
That is.
Yeah, exactly.
Brutal. Anyways, thank you for sorry, I was on mute like an idiot. But yeah, I'm looking. We got a little bit of news to talk about, obviously, and then we'll break down a lot of kind of like salary cap stuff and maybe some ideas and what way that the Kings may go, may not go, what ideas we have. So it should be fun. But all in all, doing all right. Randon, how's things with you?
Things are going pretty good. Got a little sunburn this weekend. Tried out the rooftop pool for the first time.
Okay.
Need to learn to apply the sunscreen a little bit better. I don't tan. I go straight from being clear to burnt. So so now I'm getting what's called, I looked it up online. It's called Hell's Itch. And I don't mean where everybody thinks it means. It means the sunburn is it just kind of gets really itchy and underneath the skin. No amount of scratching hurts, no amount of helps or whatever. And so it's like I'm trying all these phantom recipes. I feel like I'm listening to like a gypsy woman talk about how like I need to take tomato baths and praise it like to the east to get things to stop moving. But yeah, last night was tough on the sleep. Only got about 2 hours, 3 hours, and then a lot of cold showers to keep it from itching. It was just brutal. But other than that, I'm excited for this episode as well. I think we're going to get some good conversation going. I just want to let everybody know that you guys are here to participate in this as well. So if you want to throw in some players to talk about in the chat, we'll try to get to them all. If you want to force your hand and force us to talk about the guy you want to talk about, that donation's always there. You guarantee to get us to talk about your player at that point. So we've got a lot of good stuff ready. Russell's been in the lab with a lot of good data, so he's ready to go on this one. But before we get into the salary cap, let's talk about Jim Hiller. Extension today, rumored to be 3 years for the team. I think a lot of fans knew that this was the most likely option. What does this mean, or what does this signal to the future of the Kings, and kind of where's your confidence level going into next season?
Ooh, I mean, to be honest with you, nobody's surprised by the hiring, right? I mean, we all kind of expected Jim Hiller to be the head coach for next year, especially talking to Rob Blake at the end of season media availability. I mean, as far as confidence level, I'd be lying if I said it was high. It's probably not high. I guess that's more or less the outlook of the entire team, not just Hiller specifically. If you kind of look at Hiller in isolation in this hire, I'm not like overly upset about it or like over the moon about it. I like Hiller. I think he did a pretty good job as the head coach to end the year with the Kings. I mean, he was given this roster and this lineup that was desperate for wins, and that's what he did. He won games. And you could say like the schedule was very favorable, which it was. It was one of the easiest schedules, if not the easiest schedule across the NHL for the Kings to end the year when he took over. But he got the wins, and that was all he needed to do and try to make the playoffs, and he did that. And then things kind of blew up in his face in the playoffs against the Oilers. So, I mean, to be honest, like it just is what it is. And I think the overall shock for me was the fact that he was given a multi-year deal. I know it's pretty much the norm that coaches get multi-year deals when they come on, but I think it just more or less signals that they allow Rob Blake this opportunity to give a multi-year deal, and maybe his leash is a little bit longer than we all expected is what it seems to me. So that's what was kind of surprising in that fact. So the Hiller move, as long as he has full autonomy to do whatever he wants, and Rob Blake talked about the ideas that he has in mind to become this head coach for the Kings, as long as he has that autonomy, take over, make any changes, make any roster kind of personnel moves. I know he's not obviously making trades or signings or whatnot, but as far as what players he wants playing and where, how he wants to play them, what system they should run, I'm curious.
I think the multi-year deal is just what every coach is going to want. They're going to want security, right? The Kings got rid of all the assistants, so they're kind of letting him pick his staff. I think if it's a disappointing season and Rob Blake does get fired, 2 years, if you cut the coach, I mean, it's just money at that point. There's no cap, disappointments or prolonging of payment that you have to pay down the line. And, to us, millions of dollars is a lot of money, but to the owners of the Kings, not necessarily so if a new GM wants to start over. Because if they feel confident in the GM that they're hiring, they're going to feel confident in him to help pick the coach that they want going forward. So I think the multi-year deal doesn't really affect me too much because I figure that's what it would be. No coach is really going to come here, established or otherwise, on a 1-year contract. But I do think that I think you're right, and it gives Blake a little bit more leash, because if his hire is successful next season, even if it's a mediocre successful, say they win one round, right? But they don't beat Edmonton. It's a random opponent or whatever. They win one round and they get waxed in the second. Is that successful enough to get an extension? Is that successful enough that they get, that he proved that he can change, and then we don't know what him and Hiller talked about. And I think that's the big thing for me is the press conference that you're going to go to tomorrow, Russ. Like, what were his ideas? Because a lot of people talk about him and like, oh, it didn't get any better. But you look at if you want to poke that kind of argument, that's fine. If you want to think optimistic, I mean, over the last 2 years that Hiller was in charge of the power play, they were 7th in the league in the regular season, and then we're 10th in the playoffs. And that was going 0-15 or 0-10 or whatever this playoffs. So they were still effective on the offensive side of the puck. 5-on-5 and in the neutral zone is where a lot of people have the issue. So is it a small tweak in the neutral zone? Is Hiller saying, hey, I no longer want statue defensemen. I want you to get me some playmakers in the back end. And he tells Rob Blake what he needs. All that kind of stuff is going to be a symbiotic relationship, hopefully. And it's not Rob Blake just saying, hey, we're going to run this back again. We're going to nail this down for the 4th time and expect different results. And because if that's the case, then, we might not, you might not even want to watch any games next season. But if the fact that if they're going to come at this at a point to where they're both trying to make this relationship work, I think that Hiller does probably have some ideas how to run this thing. And he did it on the fly in the playoffs, showed some glimpses of success. He was willing to change lines on a fly. He got the power play to a successful level for the most part outside of the playoffs. So there's some things to be happy about with him. I think all fans are just scared of, hey, we're signing up for the same exact season we just watched.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly feels that way after Blake went out and said how much progress the Kings made, and then he is still there, Luke's still there, and then now you're bringing Hiller back. It's like, what's going on here? But I am optimistic about Hiller. I'm not like jumping for joy or anything, just because we can't really judge based off of what he did. The offense was abysmal, but I think he was trying to do whatever he had to do to make playoffs and just try to do whatever he could to win a game. So I'm not going to read too much into what he did at the end of last season. I'm going to really, really try to forget the immeasurables quote that he had. And just, there were plenty of comments and questionable personnel decisions that I can totally get with the frustration, but I want to see it through with a full off season. And you guys have both pointed out that Rob Blake talked about not only the fact that Hiller had different ideas that he wanted to hear out, which I'm very interested in, but also that Rob Blake admitted that they may need to look at, is their style of play something that they should continue. So those two things have me optimistic that Hiller is going to have the ability to maybe do some things a little bit different. I also don't think it matters if there's not personnel changes in certain positions. I think it'll all be just kind of window dressing, and maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they get by a round, but it's not a team that with this defense core that's going to make a deep run. I will say with regards to Rob Blake, I agree that I looked at it a little bit differently than you guys, though. Like, I think Rob Blake, if he was truly concerned about his job, isn't hitching his hopes to a guy with 40 games of NHL experience. I think he's going to look for somebody with a little bit more experience. So whether that means –
But would that coach hitch their wagon to Rob Blake?
So here's the thing, and I push back on this idea that the Kings are not an attractive spot. How many playoff teams right now are looking for coaches, and what team is in a better situation than the Kings that need a coach? And there's only 32 of these jobs right now. There's only a few that are left, I think. I don't think there's many that are. I just don't buy that at all. I think if you go to
so Keefe and Berube were the big people that were signing, and let's play this argument that you're proposing.
Okay.
Does the Kings have is the Kings a more attractive place than Toronto or New Jersey?
Okay, so if you're comparing it to those two, nope. No, if the Kings were interested in Berube or were interested in Keefe, they're going to lose out to Toronto and they're going to lose out to New Jersey. That I agree with. But there are names out there like coaches that have NHL experience under their belt. I don't believe Gerard Gallant has been hired.
No.
Dean Evison was fired in Minnesota. Quinn from formerly the Rangers was with San Jose. I'm missing somebody else. I mean, I don't know if Bruce Boudreau's coaching anymore, going to coach anymore, but like there's other higher profile names than Jim Hiller with legitimate NHL experience, albeit not maybe the level of some other guys that I'd be hard pressed to see them turn down an LA Kings job for a playoff team. I don't subscribe to that. In certain situations, maybe the top guys, to your point, Randon, the Keefes and the Berubes, yeah, the Kings are not going to be as attractive as Toronto or as the Devils. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But beyond that, I don't buy the rest of the argument.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like with Hiller, it just feels like the Rob Blake didn't exhaust all options. I mean, from the outside in. And I guess the one thing that, I mean, tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day because like that's where all these answers that are going to be, all these questions that all these fans want to know about are going to be answered, right? The system, that's the biggest one that everybody wants to see change, because if you come in and just run the same 1-3-1, Pierre-Luc Dubois as a third-line center getting 45 points a season, it's like, then what are we doing here? How much change are we really discussing? So that's where it's like, I mean, I think a lot of people aren't really upset at Jim Hiller being the actual coach. It's the fact that who's making the decision to bring in Jim Hiller as the coach. That's where everyone gets upset because, I mean, let's say a new GM came in and Jim Hiller was the coach. Everybody would be like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, give him the reins to do whatever he wants and changes and all this stuff. But the fact that for the last few years, it seems like Rob Blake has had a guy. Well, obviously it's only been McClellan, but it seems like it's been a coach that has been only adhering to whatever Rob Blake wishes are. And I think you mentioned this last week, Joe. Like, you're worried that a guy's just going to come in and be the yes man for Rob Blake. Just say like, hey, whatever you want to do, sir. Like, if you want to give Andreas Englund full 82 games, let's do it. If you want to send Brant Clark down the AHL for a longer stint, then let's do it. And I think that's where everybody's worried is how much of control is Hiller going to have on this team.
And I guess what's interesting is why. Maybe it's not that hard of a question to answer, but like all of a sudden now you're going to be more flexible. I guess after 3 first-round exits in a row to the same team for the same exact reasons, finally you're figuring it out. But in figuring that out, if that has happened, like it's on him to make the necessary personnel changes. And he's shown, again, it's funny because I've praised him for a lot of his deals historically, but boy, he can't build a blue line though. That's a big miss for him. Like that's a significant deficiency when you look at the rest of the playoffs and these teams that are still in it that Rob Blake has totally whiffed on. Because I think he's done an okay job with filling out the forwards, from a depth standpoint. I think obviously they were hoping for their stars to be Turcotte and Byfield. That hasn't panned out. Byfield looks to be evolving to that after last season, which is great. But so they kind of missed on getting their big stars, but hopefully Byfield evolves. But I think he's done an okay job building out the depth of that forward group and the prospect group. But it's the blue line that he's just missed big time. So that has to change. And so bottom line for me, Randon, like this is fine. Hiller comes in. If there's going to be a tweak in the system, that's fine. If the personnel basically is what it is, I'm going to say more specifically the blue line personnel. It doesn't matter. The Kings are going to be good enough to probably make playoffs, depending on their matchup. Maybe get past the first round, and that's it. And there's the ceiling. If this blue line is still the blue line, that the ceiling is that, in my opinion.
So I look at it this way with Rob Blake. I mean, he signed Kovalchuk and immediately realized this is not a fit, right? So he got rid of Kovalchuk. Well, it's easy to get rid of a free agent, but when you put money and draft capital into a Gavrikov or those types of things that are big things, those aren't as easy to move off from, right? Cal Peterson he had to pay to move off from that mistake, right? And then, I think it's just gauging where this team is, right? This team was abysmal down the center. Velarde couldn't figure out 2C long term. So they bring in Danault. Well, Danault is obviously a better center than Velarde is, more responsible two-way. The team dramatically improves. You get Victor Arvidsson, who's a previous 30-goal scorer, for almost nothing. The team dramatically improves over the wingers that you have on there. But I think the fact that he doesn't trust any of his young talent. I mean, Laferriere was an anomaly this year for how he's typically treated prospects. So I think he did the right thing in making his team better and then realized, hey, well, we're only a couple players away from being a playoff team in Danault and Victor Arvidsson. Maybe we can make this work with a big trade. Go ahead and get Fiala. Awesome trade. Brock Faber's doing well for Minnesota. Who cares? We got a good part in that trade as well. And then you're like, okay, well, now Kempe took this piece up. And so is it an unfair evaluation of this team that we were this close? Is it an evaluation that, hey, we went from a bottom feeder to a playoff team in a couple of years, so we should continue this linear progress? I would wager that the difference between a lottery pick or a top 5 pick in the NHL to a playoff team is a lot shorter distance than a playoff team to a Stanley Cup contender. So where is the recognition going to be on what this team is going forward? Is he going to be able to say, hey, Andres Englund playing 82 games is not beneficial for us. So I don't care what we have to do. We send him to the A. We trade him away for peanuts. We got to get somebody else different in here. Hey, guarding these prospects that's shown that they can play in the NHL, i.e. Turcotte, Akil Thomas, Fagemo, is no longer beneficial to us. Hey, our highest prospect in the prospect pool and Brent Clark needs to be playing more minutes in the NHL. If this is cognizant or on his radar, instead of clogging up those spots, and then he allows Jim Hiller to have a lot of say in how he wants to run the team, and even the future draft picks, our number 1 pick this year, on how the prospect pool shapes up, because Dvorak is just more of the same. I liked his toughness. I liked his size. He was a left-handed shot, so he fits what the prospect pool needs. Everybody knows, and you're going to hear it next week when we start talking about prospects. I'm not a fan for drafting for need at the NHL level because it takes forever to get there, and your team is going to be completely different. But the way they draft going forward, with that first overall pick, if they draft a floor player or they draft a guy who is not skill based or is just a big body, then we're going to already know it's going to be more of the same. If they draft a high skill player that's going to be a lot of upside and it's different from the type of players they normally draft, well, then maybe we might have a little shot there. But I think it really all comes down to the relationship that Rob Blake and Hiller are going to have this season. Are there going to be equal say? Is Rob Blake going to realize that this isn't working and we can make some quick adjustments? The next few months will be telling about how the entire 6 months following that will go.
I think even just the first couple months, if like that's the thing that keeps creeping in my mind is we all, from the outside in, everybody expected Rob Blake to be gone after the season. Everybody. It was a total surprise that he came back as the GM. So now if that continues to be the case and you just have, I mean, let's say they have a start to the season like the Edmonton Oilers had, where they had to fire their head coach because they just couldn't do anything else. Like, what happens then? You just signed Hiller to a 3-year deal. Rob Blake, is Rob Blake the one out the door and then a new GM comes and Jim Hiller stays? I mean, where do you go from there? That's the question that comes into my mind, is because now it's like, I think this is a good team. I think this is a great team. I really feel like they're only a couple pieces away from really being a Stanley Cup contender. Even just changing a system can be a dramatic improvement in my mind. So, but if things just continue to go the way they've been going from the All-Star break to the end of the season, because the team they're winning games, but they didn't look good doing it. Like, let's just be real. And in the playoffs, they look terrible. So there's that. I mean, they're going up against a really good Edmonton Oilers team, but even then, you're expected to be competitive, and most of those games weren't even that. So if you have a bad start to the season next year, where do you go from here?
I think it could depend, because is this, or maybe not either way, because it's Rob Blake that's making the decision. So I think if there's a bad start, it's a much bigger indictment on Rob Blake than it is Jim Hiller, I would think. But it depends. Like, is this slow start with basically the roster as is, with re-signing a couple guys, maybe bringing in a depth player from the outside, whatever, or do they make significant changes to the roster? Even if it is only a couple, they could still be significant, and they still struggle. Because also keep in mind, by and large, this roster is going to be very similar. Even if there's significant changes, there's only going to be one or two of them probably. So in theory, if you're implementing a system change, there could be an adaptation period, an adaptation to that could take a little bit of time for them to get used to. One thing I'm not sure about is, will they play the same defensive system? It's been a very man-on-man defensive system for a few years now. Will that continue? And that can be an adjustment, right? So there's a lot that, if there's going to be changes system-wise, that, there's going to need to be a little bit of flexibility in the first month of the season for them to really kind of get comfortable with that, depending on what those changes are. So I think you're right, though. I mean, I do think it's more of an indictment on Blake than it is Hiller if the team gets off to a bad start. Unless the changes Blake made this offseason, if he makes changes this offseason to improve the roster, then maybe it is on Hiller. But it just, that kind of depends. But either way, Blake's the one that made the decision. So he, at some point, is going to have to take a fall if things go south. And obviously we don't, we'll see what happens. Maybe not. Maybe they get off to a great start again, and who knows?
I want to ask you guys real quick though. What do you, tomorrow obviously we get to hear from Hiller for the first time. What do you guys want to hear from him? Like, what are some things you want to hear Hiller say, as far as whether it be system, personnel, players specifically? Like, what thing, Joe? I'll start with.
Well, listen, I mean, I would love to ask about specific players, but I don't think you're going to get true transparency about individual players, because you've got guys that are under contract or in contract negotiations. So that's a delicate one. What I would say is there was a lot of conversation in the exit interviews from players, and then with Rob Blake about the 1-3-1. Everybody, maybe not everybody, but Rob Blake was somebody that said we have to look at it. Some players were like, maybe we got to consider something else. And in saying that, the guy sitting next to you, Rob Blake, said that you have different ideas for how you would like to play. Could you care to expand on what some of those ideas might be? That's what I'm interested in is what was his thoughts on the players' comments about the 1-3-1? What are his thoughts on how he wants to play the game of hockey? And I guess depending on his answer, a follow-up is the roster constructed for how you want to play? And those are what I'm curious about, because I think those questions go hand in hand. But because Blake specifically said Jim Hiller has ideas of how he wants to play stylistically, I think it's a fair question to say, hey, what is that? What is the style that you like to play? How do you see hockey and a team that you ideally would like to coach play in 2024?
Mm-hmm.
I think my question is simple. Were you hired as an extension of the previous regime, or were you hired to change it? Are you
Randy
were you
heart?
What?
Randy going right for the heart.
I mean, were you hired because the fact that you were the remaining member of the last regime, and it's easy for Rob Blake to continue that because and you're familiar, or were you hired because you have actual ideas on how to change it and make this team better? And if so, what are those changes? And I think that's just simple. I mean, it's right to the heart, because that's what all fans are wondering. I think that's what most of the players are wondering, obviously, by the exit interviews.
And Russ, sorry, Randon, but it's kind of along those lines. Like, I think a lot of people are pissed off at Rob Blake talking about the progress that was made. Now, again, you're probably going to get a lot of coach speak, so take it with maybe a grain of salt. But I'd be a little interested in hearing, where do you think the Kings improved last season, and do you agree with that assessment that there was a lot of improvement from the team?
Yeah, I think that's
similarly. What areas does he need to improve on to get better? How do you get past the first round? How do you get past the Edmonton Oilers type of thing?
Yeah, if he's able to elaborate on the ideas that Rob Blake had mentioned, that'd be great, because that's the reason he became the head coach, right? Because apparently Rob Blake favored those ideas, or he thought those were good ideas that he's allowed to, okay, let's give you a 3-year deal. You're the man at the helm. I think another big one too I want to know about is Rob Blake made that statement of they need to work with the coaching staff in order to get P.L. Dubois to be a more productive player, or even a better player. So I want to know what those conversations were like, because we saw Jim Hiller pretty much. I mean, at the start of when Hiller took over, Dubois, he played better. He had a stint where he looked pretty good right after the All-Star break, but then he kind of tailed back off to the same P.L. Dubois that we'd seen throughout the regular season. So that's kind of where I'm curious at, because that's going to be the main focus throughout the entire summer and the early parts of the year is what can you get out of this player who's now going to be the highest paid forward in your team next year. You can't have him be a 40, 50-point scorer next year. That's completely unacceptable. So the biggest, as before, right after system, I guess it would be system. I feel like is number one in style and how he wants to see the team play. Number two has got to be, what can you do to get the most out of P.L. Dubois, or what do you think he can do? Because with the amount of money that you're paying, the draft or the trade assets that you tried to get him, that's one of the biggest problems for this team right now.
I think the reality is, and this might be too harsh, is that the Kings were the only option for Hiller. And so, is Hiller a head coach anywhere else than LA at this point?
Probably not.
So then is Hiller going to do whatever Rob Blake wants because he knows that's his only opportunity to be a head coach?
Yeah.
And make that kind of money? I think it's also easier. It's harder to get a head coaching job than it is to get a second head coaching job. Right? So once you've already been accepted into the head coach and you have that on your resume, it's easier to find that elsewhere because now your resume builds that. I just don't know if, to me, again, it comes down to, were you hired to do more of the same and lead what this team has been doing? Or are your conversations with Rob Blake going to bring change to this team?
Yeah, I think one of the questions I want to ask him too is what personnel does he see this team needing to add, or what kind of upgrades do you think this team needs to add in the offseason? Because I think also that might add to like the system and the style and change, and maybe lead into a little bit of that. Because if he says, I mean, like you mentioned, Joe, he's the one who said that all those immeasurables about a player like England, and he wants to have Frank Clark be this defensive player. But like Joe has stamped throughout the entire year that the biggest problem with this team is the lack of mobility on the back end. Because I agree. I think the forward depth is really good, one of the best in the Western Conference still. But when you lack that ability to move the puck up ice in your blue line, those forwards aren't going to get the puck.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
I think people look at goals against and expected goals against and shots against and how the Kings rate very well in those and say, wow, their D's great. It just totally misses the point. I mean, none of these teams in playoffs go deep. No teams don't win if you don't have defensemen that can get the puck out of your zone efficiently and on your forward sticks efficiently. And as we've talked about on this show, it's not always about defensemen scoring points per se. Obviously, that helps. Look at Evan Bouchard. He's in the conversation for Conn Smythe right now. But, it does matter if you can't get the puck out of your own zone with possession. And the Kings are among the worst in the league at doing so. How do you fix that? That's maybe in part that's aided by the system. I will buy that. And I'll go back to have people watch Kevin Fiala's answer about the 1-3-1, and which I think he did a really good job at to talk about why some of that's difficult with clean. So some of that is system. I also think some of that is personnel. A lot of that is personnel. So, how do you go about fixing that? And that's why I said earlier, like one of the questions would be, how do you like to play? What are some of the system changes that you would like to see implemented? And to your point, Russ, a follow-up to that is, does this team have the personnel for you to play the way you want to play?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's going to be many questions going to be answered tomorrow, and I know we got a big segment ahead with the tinfoil hat, so I think we'll cut it there with the coach talk. It's just going to be interesting how people feel after tomorrow. Is it going to be more of the same dread that we saw a lot today on Twitter? Is it going to be a little bit of uplifting based on his answers? Only time will tell. But what's a given is our shirts are available for sale. Let Kev be Kev shirts available for $30. He's lighting it up in the World Championships. Sizes small through 2XL for $30, or you can get the combo platter, a little more Kev combo for $45. DM all orders to NHL Russell and Venmo hockey at Hockey Royalty. Well, the segment has come that everybody's been waiting for. Here we go. So buckle up. We have a little bit of, where did I put that? Where's my little, oh, there it goes. Cap fun for everybody here. So we're going to be breaking down the cap for the team. So let's get in, buckle up. It's time to.
Downey looks like Chris Tanev there. He's got a little Chris Tanev.
He does.
I like it though.
So let's get into a little cap fun here. So what we'll do here is bring up the PowerPoint made by your illustrious and looks like fresh cut Russell Morgan over there. So just for this episode, new PowerPoint and a fresh cut for this episode. You fans are, getting the full treatment here. But Russ put a lot of work into this. Let me tell you, hours, slaves nights, sacrificed a little bit of his relationship with his fiance to buckle down and give you the brass tacks.
Don't get me in
wife.
trouble.
Sorry, wife. No,
I'm sure she watches this religiously, so I just want to make sure.
She's probably watching in the other room live, like critiquing you already. Yeah. But Russ, lead us down the primrose path to what the outlook looks like for the 24-25 season.
Yeah, so it's funny because I was going to sit down to write an article about the salary cap, and I'm like, man, this is there's so many numbers and so many variables and everything. So I was like, yeah, PowerPoint's the way to go. So we put this together, and I feel like it'll be a little bit of fun, get a little bit of interaction with the chat here. Much easier in terms of visuals. So let's dive into it. We'll dive into this little 2024-25 LA Kings salary cap outlook. So
And if you guys are
first slide-
if you guys are listening to it tomorrow morning in your car, if you want visuals, go back and listen to the YouTube. We'll try to do our best to describe it to you in podcast format. You guys that watch it on YouTube live, you're in for a treat. So buckle up.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Randy. Yeah, that's a good tidbit. So yeah, first thing here, salary cap's going up for the first time. What? First time in like since before COVID? I think the last few years it's only gone up like $1 million each year. So this year, like this tweet here, LeBron stated going up to $87.7 million. Previous year was 83.5, so a $4.2 million cap increase. That's obviously going to help the Kings, going to help teams across the NHL that are strapped as far as the salary cap. So that's some pretty big news. And then we'll look at the Kings. So there's a little bit of formatting issues. We're not perfect here at Hockey Royalty, even though we strive to be. A little bit of formatting issues. But so this is the outlook of what the Kings have signed right now. All these players are on the Kings books for their salary cap right now. It's 13 players signed for next season, and it's a total of $63 million, $313,333. So yeah, if you could take a look at it, I'll just run through the players for those that are listening. Kevin Fiala, Kopitar, Kempe, Moore, Deneau, Laferriere, and Dubois. Those are your forwards up front. And then in the back end, you have Mikey Anderson, Drew Doughty, Gavrikov, Brant Clark, Andreas Englund. And then as far as goaltenders, we have the one and only David Riddick, who was just signed to his 1-year extension deal, $1 million, just I believe it was last week. So I didn't put Giacomo Barara on here. He is signed for next season. I'd be surprised if he started on the roster. He could start off as a backup, but we'll dive into that a little bit more once we get into the fun cap-friendly armchair feature here later on. But those are your players signed for next season. Obviously, you could see the holes that are in the lineup. Got a few forward spots. You got a defensive spot, and you have a goaltender you need to figure out. So as far as the dead cap and bonuses that will roll over, obviously one more year left of Ivan Provorov at a little over $2 million, his dead cap hit, and then that pesky Mike Richards dead cap hit that feels like it'll never go away. And then you add those together with the carryover bonuses. I believe Cam Talbot Cam Talbot is one of those bonuses, and I think it's Quentin Byfield's fun bonuses that we were all happy for him that are now going to bite the Kings in the butt now. But hey, he got his money, so there's that. So I'm
always for players getting their money. So good on you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's gonna add. It's funny, but it's a little over $4.5 million in dead cap that the Kings have. That's going to be on the books for next year. So something that they have to work with. Not a big deal. Not too crazy. I'm sure other teams are dealing with a little bit more. Minnesota Wild and specifically, but we'll keep on rolling here. So if you add that all,
deal, Russ.
I'm sorry.
Gotta love that Provorov deal.
Yeah, exactly. So $2 million of Ivan Provorov. One more year though, Joe.
That's right.
Year. So that total, if you total the roster players that they have and the cap hit bonuses, total is $67 million, a little over 800,000, or I guess close to 900,000. That leaves them with $19,811,000 in cap space for next season. So close to $20 million in cap space, which, think about it, sounds pretty good. Sounds like quite a bit of change that the Kings have to work with. But
with 7 spots.
7 spots to fill. That's right. You have a goaltender you need to fill. You have a defenseman you need to fill. You have 4 forward spots you need to fill. And then you have your restricted free agents that you need to re-sign. Oh, well, let's get into the unrestricted free agents first. We'll dive into the unrestricted free agents first. So the unrestricted free agents for the Kings, Trevor Lewis, Victor Arvidsson, and Matt Roy. I think...
No.
Yes. So what do you guys think any of these players come back? Randy, we got your answer. Joe, what about you?
Oh, boy. I can see a scenario. I can make a case for any one of them. With Rob Blake as GM, I think there may be a world where they value Lewis again. Victor Arvidsson on a 1-year deal does make sense. I don't know what his market is, though, from an unrestricted free agent standpoint from the rest of the league. My guess is if I'm him, you might be able to get a multi-year deal from a team, and I don't know that I would do that given his health. But I like the player. I do think the Kings move on from him if I had a guess. Matt Roy, man, I think we are big Matt Roy fans on this podcast. I would like to see him back, but depends on the rest of that, how things shake out with the rest of the blue line. I'm going to just guess with Blake's aversion to playing defensemen on their offsides that if you've got Doughty, Spence, Clark penciled in, that Matt Roy, they may move on. And again, I think Matt Roy can go out and get himself a really nice, he could probably get a $35-40 million deal on a 5, 6, 7 year deal, making decent money. I really think he could get at worst like a 6x5 or something like that. He had such a good season. He's had multiple good seasons, so he could cash in here, and for his sake, hopefully he does. But
I think Victor Arvidsson is the most likely out of these three because with him being injury riddled, he might go with something that's more familiar to him. Who knows how he feels about the system? Maybe he feels like he's being hampered by the system that's being run. So I'm not sure on how he feels about it. But a guy that's been injured, didn't really prove anything in the playoffs. Is he going to get a 3-year by 3x4 or 3x5, or is he more likely to get like a 1x2.5 and play middle 6 minutes? I would wager it's the latter.
It's just so hard for me. I mean, I honestly I don't know. I like I said, I can see the Kings. I can make a case for any of these that Rob Blake's going to say this is a valuable player and we want to keep him. And that may be true or it may be not true, depending on the player here. It's so hard, honestly. I'm going to say no just because there's a lot that they have to do, and I would say none of them come back, but I wouldn't say
unfortunately, I think the one that comes back is Trevor Lewis.
I kind of agree with that.
I just see it coming. I mean, we just looked at the roster. You have 4 forward spots. We'll dive into a little bit more how the rest of those RFA signings and any other spots you need to fill kind of shape the roster. But when you're kind of looking at depth pieces that this team likes, and not to say that I would be in favor of signing him, but what the team likes, the familiarity with the area and whatnot, I think Trevor Lewis is probably the one more likely.
But he's the easiest to replace. He's the easiest
Correct.
To replace.
100%. Yeah, I agree. But
and maybe, hopefully, the whole quote unquote veteran locker room leader, because they guarantee you part of the reason they brought him in was to add that veteran presence to help get them over the hump in that first round.
Yeah.
And shocking that didn't happen. So hopefully they realize that doesn't make any sense, and hopefully they don't bother to go that route again.
Yeah, I agree. So the next trio of unrestricted free agents was the goalies. A little bit of formatting issue here, but I'll just kind of run through. Cam Talbot, David Riddick, Phoenix Copley. All 3 goalies played for the Kings this past season. Unrestricted free agents. David Riddick obviously re-signed, so he's not a UFA anymore. But you have Cam Talbot and Phoenix Copley that are unrestricted free agents. Do you guys see any of these guys coming back next year?
I still think I can see Talbot coming back. Obviously Rittich is. I guess Copley, if he's healthy, can sign an AHL deal. They're going to need somebody in Ontario to play with Portillo, so I can certainly see that. But coming off the year Talbot had, I can see them sticking with him. That wouldn't surprise me.
How about you?
I think that Copley is probably the easiest one to get cheap, right? Coming off an injury, you probably could sign him for minimum. Mm-hmm. He's already been a fringe NHL or AHLer for his career. It wouldn't surprise me if he was the guy in the AHL getting rehab assignments pretty much essentially behind Portillo. until he's needed. So I think that a guy like that could be something that really he would only be on the radar for the Kings. So they wouldn't be really bidding against many people. Talbot with him being an all-star, I know he said he wants to stay and wants a multi-year deal. Might have a little bit more bidding war against the Kings, but I don't think really anybody else is going to be interested in Copley. And he could be a nice goalie 3 AHL piece coming back off an injury.
Yeah, I'd actually love to see Copley come back and be the second guy in the reign. I think that'd be a cool story. And then if needed, I mean, we've seen him get called up. I mean, we all maybe expect Portillo to be the guy. I will say, I think Portillo kind of struggled in the last playoff series, those last few games in the Calder Cup. I mean, the entire team did. They got swept by the Firebirds. But, I mean, that was almost like a reminder of like, okay, this is still a young goalie. Exactly. This is still a young goalie that needs some work. You can't just kind of throw him into the NHL games and expect some great results. I mean, you never know, but even still,
if it were that easy, Jesper Wallstedt, Devin Levi,
Spencer Knight,
Dustin Wolf, Spencer Knight, all of these guys, Askarov would be number
all
one
drafted higher, I believe, than
and they'd all be number ones in the NHL right now. It ain't that easy between the pipes.
So I think bringing back Copley is probably a really good decision, in my opinion. If he's healthy, if he comes back healthy to start a camp, I think that'd be a really solid. He's familiar with the team and the organization, obviously, so team likes him. A good story. These are actually the projections, courtesy of evolvinghockey.com. They just released their contract projections for unrestricted free agents and restricted free agents. So thanks to them, I was able to pull up all the UFAs that the Kings have. And these are the numbers that they predicted. So I'll just kind of run through them real quick. Matt Roy, the highest predicted cap hit. They're predicting 5 years at a $6 million hit. Just over $6 million for Roy. Victor Arvidsson, they're predicting 1 year at just over $3 million. So kind of what we were thinking there. Cam Talbot, 1 year, $2.6 million. I think that's probably a little high. I think it maybe a little bit glossing over the fact that he had maybe a little bit of a struggle, played behind a good team, but he did have the all-star nod, so that kind of helps him out a little bit. David Riddick, they predicted him at a 2-year, $2 million cap hit, $2.3 million cap hit, so the Kings definitely got some great value there. Copley, 1 year, pretty much league minimum, $970,000, and Trevor Lewis, 1 year, definitely league minimum, $775,000. Any of these numbers kind of jump out to you guys? Randon, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I thought was most likely out of the forward group to sign back, Victor Arvidsson, that 1x3 might not be bad for a middle six guy. Yep. I think that's probably the most feasible for the Kings in this situation. Matt Roy, I mean, we've been seeing him for a long time, and I don't think the rest of the league respects his game. You know, and I think 5x6, I think any fan base that signs Matt Roy and they see a 5x6, I think they're probably, you know, panicking quite a bit. And I probably would too. I mean, you're getting a similar player to Gavrikov with a lot more skating mobility and that kind of thing. But $6 million is still a big cap hit to choke up for a primarily defensive defenseman who can eat up some minutes. I think if you're a team, you know, a 5x4 or a 5x5 would be a lot more palatable than a 5x6. But I think he's the least likely to get signed back in that number. I mean, I don't see him taking a 3x3 or something like that for the Kings to get under the cap. I think he's going to go for the payday, which leads me to believe that Copley and Arvidsson are probably the most likely to get signed back based on these numbers.
I love Arvidsson at 1x3. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, don't know what the player's motivations are, if he's looking for a multi-year deal. All that stuff comes into play here. And these, correct me if I'm wrong, Russ, these are the most likely scenarios?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? I know
obviously, it's a range of motion and whatnot.
Yeah, because Evolving Hockey will do every year, like 1 year, 2 year deal, 3 year deal, 4 year deal, all the way up till a 7 or 8 year deal if it's, you know, if you're signing with the same team, and give you their projection based on that. But they're also going off of the likelihood. So these that are shown are the most likely contracts. So I mean, Roy, to that end, you know, on a 3 year deal, I don't know what their contract was for Roy on a shorter deal, but again, this is like his last big time to cash in. And I think you're right, Brandon. I didn't even think of it that way. That if a team not in Los Angeles sees Matt Roy sign for 5x6, they're like, what? Because I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of fans that just have no idea who Matt Roy is. So to that point, maybe he wouldn't get that much. Maybe there isn't that much of I don't know, I guess, but I think the guy's deserving. I think he's a really good player. I think he can fit in other systems. If he wants a 5-year term, which I don't blame him, I would thank him and move on. I am attracted to that Arvidsson deal at 1x3. That's exactly the type of deal that I would be comfortable signing him for.
I mean, 5 years is not that bad.
bad.
Matt Roy's not bad at 5 years, right? He's 28, so that he's
Yeah.
maybe 33, 34 by
$6
the
million
end of it.
is kind of high.
But six is rich.
It is.
Six is rich.
And consider like you mentioned, Randon, like he is primarily a defensive defenseman. I do think he's got more to offer.
Is he any better than Mike Anderson?
Right.
I think he's better.
You think Roy's better than Mike
Right
Anderson?
Right now, yes. Mikey could be better. I mean, Mikey's still young. Right? He's 24 years old.
Yeah,
25?
he is.
So Mike
Roy's
got a
28.
4-year deal. So what? Like, if you were a team in a playoff hunt, a 5x4 contract or 5x4.5 would be perfect. 5x5
Yep.
would probably be stretching it for you.
Yep.
But that would be a nice guy in the middle six that could eat, or the top four that could eat a lot of minutes.
The reason I don't like it, and I always just don't like the term, is he's not going to get any better. Like this is peak Matt Roy, and he can maybe stay here for a couple of years, but like we're not going to see another level of Matt Roy. I don't think. I guess you can make the argument in a different system, you could see a better Matt Roy, or you could see a worse Matt Roy. So that's where I'm like, 5 years. I don't really want to go that long. To be honest, I don't want to be locked in that long, because if things go south in 2 years, now what do you do? You know, because that's just where I'm at. So I would rather just look elsewhere.
I will say though, the defenseman that led the Kings in goals above replacement this past year was Matt Roy.
Yeah.
So still a great player. Which
he is a really good defenseman.
Mm-hmm. I think 5.5, and that's the thing where I get so. It's kind of frustrating, because like I wonder like how much, if this team could still be good with Matt Roy if they didn't sign Gavrikov and just shifted one of Clark or Spence to the left side. If they had that ounce of creativity in their heads, I wonder how that would look. But it's just so tough when you have those two young righties that are supposed to be like the anchors of your defense for the future. And then you sign like a player like Matt Roy, who's 28 years old, who's obviously like a great player, like we said. You signed like a 4 or 5 year deal. It's like, okay. And you still have Drew Doughty here. It's like, that's where it's the hard pill to swallow.
And again, to your point, if you know, in a scenario where they did move off of Gavrikov, if they got him to waive his no move clause and they traded him and were willing to play Clark or somebody on the left side, maybe now you're cooking with a little bit of gas. But that's,
you give that $5.8 million that you're giving Gavrikov, you give a 4-year deal, 5.5 to Matt Roy. I don't think that's terrible.
I think a team that needs Matt Roy is a team that needs a little bit of structure.
I think Buffalo Sabres could sign Matt Roy.
That's what I'm saying. I was about to say the Sabres, New Jersey, Detroit, Ottawa. Like all those teams could use a little bit of structure to go with their playmaking group. Roy is talented enough to play with that kind of style.
Yes.
So that's kind of where the teams that I would envision Matt Roy having the most appeal.
Toronto, he could do well. He could do great. Toronto could probably use a guy like him. But yeah, you're right, Brandon. I mean, he this is a guy you can fit anywhere, in any team, any situation. He's really underrated. Really underrated.
We saw him play with everybody, right? In LA. He's played with and Sean Dursey, the worst defender on the team.
I'll say this, because this is probably going to get talked about the second he leaves, if he leaves, is the Kings decided to not trade him and they let him walk for nothing. So we might as well hash that out quickly here. I don't care. I think Matt Roy gave the Kings the best chance to win because it was clear to see the way the Kings were going to operate with their decor and with their roster decisions. So that being the case, Matt Roy was going to give them the better chance to win. So I was okay with that. I don't care if it ended up meaning they lose him for nothing because then again, I was looking at it from like Rob Blake's standpoint, like this is if I don't get by the first round, I'm out. And so maybe that was never the case, but Matt Roy, I think, did give the Kings the best chance to get by the first round. So I'm okay with them doing what they did.
It's all hindsight, right?
I still disagree, though.
Yeah. No, you disagreed at the time. Remember, we were talking about this.
Yeah. I mean, I disagreed at the time. I disagree now. I think Rob Blake, I think he was like, okay, well, like I have to win. So Matt Roy is the better player at the moment. But like you let Clark play the entire last month at 18 to 19 minutes a night, getting power play time. Like what kind of player that he could have been for that roster. You saw what Walker got in a trade, a first round pick. Even if you don't get a first round pick, you get a second. This team doesn't have any picks past the first, really. So then does your prospect pool, which is now not ranked in the top 10, get a little bit thicker, right? You've missed on Turcotte to this point. Byfield is starting to come through. Clark is starting to come through. Velarde's no longer in the system. Got you PL Dubois, which didn't really work out so far. Those are a lot of negatives. Like to get a little bit of futures going through and pump that prospect pool back up. I mean, I'm working on an article right now. I think this is the most important first round pick of Rob Blake's career coming up here to potentially move forward for the Kings to continue to moving forward. I mean, I know Byfield and Clark are huge, but he'll be the face of the prospect pool, and we'll talk about that later on. But I really think that it was a misevaluation of where your team is at versus what they think they could do in the playoffs. And is the drop off from Roy to Clark that drastic? Are you a cup team? No. So if your goal is only to win run around, then you have the wrong goals, in my opinion.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, there's an argument between whether you want to give yourself the best chance to win, or if you're just kind of going in there with one hand tied behind your back with the roster you have. So that's a fair argument. I kind of like you saying that this is one of the biggest first round picks in Rob Blake's tenure. I understand, like you mentioned, Byfield and Clark. This is a total tangent I'm going on, but like I was thinking about it, like I was looking at all the first round picks that Rob Blake's had in his time. They're not that good. Besides Byfield, maybe Clark, obviously. I mean, after that, Gabe Velarde, he's gone. Kupari, not good. Tobias Bjornfoot, not good. Alex Turcotte, we have no idea. And then that's it. All the other years, he never had a first round pick. So, yeah, you have to make some noise with this one. It doesn't have to be a home run, but it has to be an impact player at least. All right, that was fun. Let's move on.
You look at let's just look at Wyatt Johnston right now for the Dallas Stars. Drafted 23 overall, so 2 spots behind where the Kings are picking now. He's 21 and he's playing 1C for this team. So like he had 32 goals and 33 points in his second year. He had 41 points as a rookie. Like, I think the only reason why people expect Kings prospects to be delayed in their growth is because the organization wants to baby them along in their growth. So like if you get a player that can produce at this point, I mean, my draft crush right now, Cole Hudson, same as his brother. His brother's now playing for Montreal. Good minutes at the end of the season. He's playing for Team USA, and he's only 2 years removed from being drafted. Like you could see top end left side of the defensive core, maybe not this season, but the season after with Cole Hudson. And then he's starting in year 3 for this team. Like that's going to be huge after the end of the Kopitar era. And I know the team, everybody wants to win now. It is what it is, win now, but how you keep an organization from not falling like it did after the cup years is having that injection every so often that hits. And I think this is one of the biggest draft picks that this team is going to have for the next 5 years.
I think one of the biggest downfalls has been the fact that he hasn't hit on his first round picks, and that
I would say Byfield's a hit for sure.
I mean, but to your point, Right, but to your point, it's taken longer. Like Wyatt Johnston is lit it up in his first couple of years here, and now he's a legit impact player. It took Byfield until, again, I know he's still young, and I'm not necessarily upset with his progression, but it's been slower than other top picks have been to get that high end production, and it looks like we may get that next season. But that's like that. You need these players on cheap deals to go off. And that's what you're hoping is your top prospects. And the Kings haven't had that production, up until just recently with Byfield. They got nothing from Turcotte, nothing from Kapari, to Russ's point, nothing from Bjornfoot.
Next year will be Clark. We're going to be talking about the impact and what the player that's going to be played. If Clark can put up 50 points in the blue line, making league minimum, like that's going to help this team win.
That's what makes a difference, is when you get guys that are producing at basically league minimum contracts. Yes.
I like what Jacob A here said in the chat. Rob Blake took so many risks on the pieces just to not take risks on the ice. I love that. It's poetic. Good job, Jacob A.
Because Kaliev was a risk. Kaliev was a bit of a
big time risk. Yeah,
that
definitely.
For multiple reasons, that hasn't worked.
Gabe Velarde was a big risk with his back injury. It took him forever. I mean, obviously, he had his injury he had to deal with, but yeah, a lot of risks in his draft picks. So we'll see. So let's go on to the restricted free agents. And obviously, there's some big ones for the Kings. One big one for the Kings this year, and that's one Quinton Byfield. His cap hit is definitely going to go up. Blake Lizotte is another one, and Carl Grundstrom is another RFA. And there's some other ones that we'll get into in the next slide here. But as far as these three, we obviously know that Quinton Byfield's going to be resigned, and we'll talk about Quinton Byfield's contract on one of the next slides here. But Blake Lizotte and Carl Grundstrom, I feel like these are two big question marks for the Kings right now because of all the talk around Akil Thomas and Alex Turcotte, who are also RFAs. But guys, do you see either one of these players coming back, or do you want to bring either of these players back? And I'll start with you, Joe.
Can I point out that Russ knows how bad left shot D is for the Kings? He's got Carl Grundstrom listed as a defenseman. That's how bad.
Oh, that's right. I do. I mean, he could play it. Why not?
Right. I'm with you. I'd play him over a certain left shot D. I will say that much. Listen, I'm a Blake Lizotte guy. I still think he's a valuable player. I know he had a down year this year from where he was the last couple of years. I think he's shown the ability to play, to drive play, to create plays, and be a productive player from a point standpoint when he's got players who can play with him, and he's shown that. So I like him. I hope he's back. I like the idea of him centering and being on a fourth line that includes an Akil Thomas or an Alex Turcotte, for example, or an Alex Laferriere if one of those other guys plays up higher in the lineup. I like that. Carl Grundstrom, I think, has been an underrated player for the Kings for a while. I like him, but again, you're starting to get to the point where it's like you're filling your roster with, at some point, if your whole bottom six is Lizotte, Grundstrom, Laferriere, Turcotte, Thomas, it's a lot of okay, but you're missing something there, right? You see I'm going like you're missing something there. So I can see the Kings moving on from one or both of these just because it may be time to kind of go in a different direction and bring something a little bit different in. I'm biased to Lizotte, so I hope it's Lizotte that stays. But I get the sense Randon does not agree with me.
Yeah, Randon. Before you get going here, I just want to. I'm going to get your input on that in just a second here, but I'll run through the other RFAs that the Kings have: Jordan Spence, Arthur Kaliev, Alex Turcotte, and Akil Thomas. And Randon, just to kind of help you out here are the numbers that evolvinghockey.com has for the RFAs. The predicted numbers most favorable, like Joe talked about earlier, as far as their contracts, and Quinton Byfield, we'll discuss his in just a second here. But as far as Blake Lizotte, they predict him at 3 years, $2.3 million. Arthur Kaliev, 2 years, $1.789 million. Carl Grundstrom, 1 by 1.39. Jordan Spence 2 by 1 point, almost 2. Turcotte, Jared Anderson-Dolan, obviously not here anymore. Akil Thomas and Sammy Fagemo all under 1 million. So, Brandon, just kind of help you out with your opinion there on any of these RFAs. Obviously, we know Turcotte's going to come back. Akil Thomas, Quentin Byfield, those Jordan Spence, another one too. That 100%, I'll say 99% sure they're coming back. But as far as the other RFAs, I see Joe's shaking his head. But as far as the other RFAs, Lizotte, Grunstrom, what are your opinions on those guys as far as bringing them back?
I mean, with the way the organization thought about Kaliev last year, there's no way he's getting 2 by 1.7. Arthur Kaliev is going to have to pay rent at Crypto if he wants to play on the Kings. So 3 by 2.3, thank you, Blake Lizotte. But I think that Akil Thomas, the 1 by 8.21, you're talking about getting value out of your contracts. That's a value. I think Akil Thomas brings exactly what you could get from Lizotte, if not more. I think Turcotte, you could bring exactly what you get from Lizotte, if not more. And like buckling yourself down, even if it's a 2-year term or a 1-year deal at 2.3, I just don't think it's beneficial to the Kings, because we're going to be talking about a lot of players going on. Where do you want value? In the minutes that are going to be played more often, which is your middle six versus your bottom six. I think Grunstrom probably gets less than 1.3. He's probably closer to 1.1 in my opinion. He brings physicality that the team needs. He led the team in hits before Andreas Englund. He has a high shooting percentage. So none of the other players on this list bring what he can bring as far as physicality on the fourth line and a little bit of size. So I think Grunstrom at a 1.1 would be fine. I think Lizotte's gone. I think Kaliev's probably more of a sign and trade or a trade in general because he needs a new location unless Hiller drastically wants to change how he envisions him. But there's no way he's getting 2 by 1.7 with the way the team looked at him last year. I think the two players that you're going to see, like I talked about with Clark, adding value, the highest value you could add for contract money is Turcotte and Thomas on this board, because Thomas could play 4C or wing. Turcotte could play 4C or wing up in the lineup like he did a little bit there. All those pieces are multifaceted in value for this team. Blake Lizotte's a fourth line center, and he's not anything else. Turcotte can play up and down the lineup. Akil Thomas can play up and down the lineup. They both can play 4C. I just think that they offer more value than what you could get. And Lizotte is who he is. He's never going to get any better. So you're signing a player that's going to be with what he is. You're looking at Turcotte and Akil Thomas are guys that can progress, and I think that are already at the level of Blake Lizotte or comparable level to where you're not losing a drop-off in play too much, but can progress into guys that can be difference makers. What if Turcotte gets 40 points in the middle six next year? Right? I mean, like that. Those are the type of things or upsides that you could possibly get with a Turcotte. Akil Thomas could be a 30 to 35 point center on the fourth line with a Grunstrom and maybe Fagemo. So to me, I just don't see Lizotte being beneficial to this team, period. I don't really care what the cap hit is unless it's the same as a Turcotte or an Akil Thomas. I think it's time to move on. And you look at the reasons why dynasties are made, and you have to win a championship to be a dynasty, but you look at the reason why dynasties are made is they're not afraid to make cuts when they need to. Kansas City Chiefs said, okay, Tyreek Hill, peace out. You want to go make $30 million somewhere else, go make $30 million. We have a strong foundation. We'll continue winning. And they did. The Patriots did that for a long time. They moved on with their pieces and they won. And I know that's the NFL and a quarterback's the most, the highest position, yada, yada, yada. But the premise is still the same. You can't hold your jewels too close. Thank you, Lizotte, for your time. You're definitely outperformed what you thought or many fans thought, but it's time to move on.
Your points are fair. What I will push back on Thomas and Turcotte out being the most valuable, because I think Jordan Spence at 1.1, he's going to far exceed that.
Yeah,
value.
You're 100% correct on that. Yeah,
he's going to go. But to your point taken, Lizotte, though, you're talking about a guy who was a year removed from a mid-30s season as a bottom six centerman. So I do think we're underselling a little bit about how good Lizotte is, but I think your fair points about how Turcotte and Thomas can be similar. What I will say is even I would push back a little bit on the 3 by 2.3 for Lizotte, and I'm a big Lizotte guy. That doesn't mean I want a term on Lizotte. Evolving Hockey, for what it's worth, has 1 by 1.8 for Lizotte. If it's a 1 year deal, I think that's a lot. You still think it's too much? I get it, and I get what you're saying.
You're getting Turcotte and Thomas for that price at 1.8. That's where I agree with Brandon in that sense, because you want to try to find as much value as you can.
I get it. We're also talking, but keep in mind we're also talking about two guys, not the healthy.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't seen full time in the NHL. We know.
But didn't Lizotte miss time last season?
He did, but that's not the norm. And to project Turcotte or Thomas for 40 points, I think is lofty.
I would say, okay, if it's not a far drop off, you said 35 points.
He's 35 points the year.
I would easily, if you want to bet me right now, if either of those guys, the 4C, 30 points easily.
I will make that bet with you. I will make that bet. Okay. So we save it, write it down. If it happens, we'll come back. We'll revisit.
If Lizotte or Turcotte start the season at 4C, they easily get 30 points.
What? No, but all right, come on. Like what are we talking here? You guys have piqued my interest. What's the actual number as far as point value, and what needs to happen in order for this to continue?
Are you saying, Randon, if it's Turcotte or Thomas, that say they move on from Lizotte? Because my interpretation of what you just said is they move on from Lizotte and they give the job to, say, Turcotte, and he's the 4C for the year, that he gets what did you say, 35 points?
Yeah, I say the drop off is not there's very little drop off. So he got 35 points. I say he at least gets 30.
I would bet, and I would take the under that Turcotte gets 30 points as a 4C.
Okay,
Turcotte or Thomas. You say either one?
Yeah, either one.
I would.
Same thing, Joe.
I'll take the bet.
I like it.
Sure.
All right.
And that's gonna see now you're painting me to look like the bad guy that I don't think Turcotte and Thomas can produce. Because
you've gotten enough praise with your more stuff, and I don't like you getting too much praise, so we need to knock you down a peg.
Fair enough.
I mean, the only thing I heard in that entire Randon rant was that he was comparing Blake Lizotte to Tyreek Hill, which I thought was hilarious, by the way.
Yeah.
I think Akil Thomas. Honestly, I think he's going to be like a top 6 player for the Kings next year. That's going to be like one of my bold takes. I loved everything I saw from him at the end of the year. I loved what I saw from him with the Kings. So I think Randon's going to be a happy man with that bet he just made. And I'm sorry, Joe.
Hey, I would love to lose that one because Randon knows I love Akil Thomas. Mm-hmm. I think a healthy Akil Thomas should have been here a while ago. So I hope for health, and I hope he's there.
You know what I like is us being 71 strong in the chat. So thank you guys for coming in here. We got another probably 45 minutes of tinfoil hat. I've yet to bring it out because we're not getting there. So let's button this up, hit the like, subscribe it, because we got a lot of good stuff coming up. Russ, kick us to the next slide, my man.
Oh, this will be a fun one. So it's the big topic in terms of RFAs. It's our boy Quinn Byfield and his contract extension. Long-term or bridge deal? What do you guys think? Let's take a look. So this was the scatter plot that Joe had mentioned in terms of Evolving Hockey. If you guys don't subscribe to evolvinghockey.com, they tremendous work. They don't just have contract projections. They have all the other analytics that we kind of mentioned on the show, expected goal share, goals above replacement, all that fun stuff, charts, you name it. They're a great website. I think it's like $5 a month. But here's their scatter plot for Quentin Byfield. And for those who are listening on the pod or can't watch the rest of the time here, they have at a more favorable contract projection, 2 years, $3.1 million. So 2 years, 3.1 is the most favorable. I think that's on the lower end as far as a bridge deal. If they want to go long term, it says 7 years at $6 million per, and then 8 years at 6.1 per. I think these numbers are a little bit on the lower end. If they do sign to a bridge deal, I'd say it's around 2, maybe 4.5, maybe 5. And if it's a longer term deal, 7, 8 years, I'd say it's probably about 6.5. But I think I started with you, Joe, last time. So I'll start with Randon. Randon, first off, do you want to see a bridge deal or do you want to see long term? And what do you think as far as these numbers?
I mean, if it's based off of these, I think the sweet spot is what it shows here is the least likely option is the 5 by 4.8. I think it's a sweet spot for both the team and the player, right? So 5 years, brings Byfield to 26. He'll be in his prime. You'll probably see at least 3 more cap hikes to where you could get probably.
Here, I'll stop you real quick right there. But the problem with that though is you're putting him at UFA after those 5 years. So I think why we say bridge deals, you want to preserve that restricted free agent tag as long as you can. So I
understand it for the team. But if you're doing the only reason a player takes less money or does anything beneficial to the team,
that's more beneficial for the player. That's way beneficial. That hurts.
But the 4.8, right? I think Byfield's like, if I sign an 8-year deal at 6, I'm going to be 29, right? The cap's going to go up multiple times. If I sign a 5-year deal, I'll be a UFA. I'm taking less money in the forefront, but then I could probably sign 10 million plus if I progress the way that I know that I can progress. So I think it benefits both there. 4.8 is palpable for the cap this year. So you can bring in plenty of guys that we can talk about going forward. I think that you look at the player, 5 years brings him to a UFA to where he has full junction. It also puts pressure on the organization to get a get an extension done before year 5. So that way Byfield feels more secure. And then you're probably talking about another 8 because 8 years at 30 or at 26, he's going until he's 34. That's another contract that's still palpable for the Kings going forward. So I think 5 is the sweet spot. I think it's the most unlikely because of the fact that, like you said, it really doesn't help Byfield. I think Byfield, if he wants to do a bridge, the 2-year deal makes the most sense because the cap hit's probably going to go up again. And if he's a point per game player, then he can cash in earlier rather than later. But I think the 5x5
contract comes off the books too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the 5x5 is the most beneficial for both parties because it helps the team now with the cap hit being only 4. It allows Byfield to have full autonomy over his life once the contract ends. And it'll allow for as much gap in between the current cap and whatever the cap may be to where he might be a $10 million player at that point.
What do you think, Joe?
If Byfield signs an 8x6, he should fire his agent.
Yeah,
it's a steal. What are we talking about? 8x6 is a steal for Quentin. If he continues on the progression that the entire hockey world thinks he's going on, he's going to be an $8 million player within 2 years. This is if it's these figures, it's a no-brainer to ink him to an 8x6. Because if you do the bridge in 2 years, you're probably paying him. It's probably if all goes well, you're paying him. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a $10+ million contract, and that's if you're getting the Quentin Byfield that they drafted and is continued to develop as the player we hope he develops too. So I want an 8-year deal. Now, to that end, I just said I don't think. But there's no reason that Byfield should accept an 8x6 for a lot of the reasons Randon pointed out that give him an opportunity at UFA sooner, or take a bridge at that point if you're Byfield and just say I'll just make you guys pay me after 2 years instead of that. So my thought was that Byfield would be on a 7-year deal or 8-year deal would be more in that. Just under 8, more in that Kevin Fiala range, maybe 7.5, 7 and change. Like I can see that maybe being somewhere where at least he'll listen. Because at $6 million, I hang up the phone if I'm his agent. Because he probably, I don't know. I'd have to look and see the Athletics. They do a really good job with their player and their market values to see what Byfield his market value was for this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he pushed 6 this year alone. So yeah, no,
I think it's hard with these because like there's a lot based off of his trajectory, right? I mean, because these projections are specifically just looking at his numbers,
sure,
and all that. So, like, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the numbers a little bit are probably a lot lower than what we see here.
I agree, yeah, but personally, I want the long-term deal. I know that is not always easy to do. You got to get the player to agree with that. They want free agency, all that stuff. My preference is long-term deal. If we can do it, I love what Ottawa did with Stützle. I like what Buffalo did with Thompson and Cousins. Go down the list. Like, I like locking up my stars, my young stars, for as long as possible because, Tage Thompson's probably market value is probably a $10 million player. Stützle's value is probably right now. Stützle's probably right about what his contract is, but he's going to blow past that. Right? That's the idea. Is pretty soon Byfield's going to blow past that value. And Randon, like you were talking about earlier, exceeding value doesn't just happen at the low end. Like getting guys that are making 5, 6, 7 million, but you're producing at 12, 13 million dollars. That matters. Like look at the years of Crosby, look at the years in Boston. Those guys were worth double than what they were getting.
Their top line was making 6.5 each.
Right. So that matters just as much on these other guys too. So hopefully they can get him to a long-term deal. I would love it if I wake up in the morning and it's an 8 by 7.5 or maybe at that point an 8 by 8. I know it's high early, but I think again, if we believe in the player, and I do, then I think that's the way to go, as opposed to, because again, 2 by 3, great, or even 2 by 4, Russ. You think maybe that's a little bit higher, a 2 by 4 ish, okay, and then in 2 years you're going to pay him $10 million. So what did we do? What did you save? So I don't know. That's where I'm at. I want the longer term deal for my star players.
Russ, I want to ask you this because not everybody in the chat is agreeing here. Christopher coming in here. Byfield is nothing without Kopitar and Kempe. Don't pay him like PLD. Do you think he's being propped up by playing on the first line, and his point total this season isn't indicative of future success?
No, I think he's going to be great. I honestly think he could balloon into like a 90+ point, almost 100-point player. He's going to be the future franchise player for the Kings. I'm getting to the point, like I've seen enough from Quinn Byfield. Like the Columbus goal alone is one of the most insane goals I've seen a Kings player score of all time, let alone in the NHL. And I was at the game that Rick Nash scored that goal in Arizona, one of the craziest goals I've ever seen live. And that Quinn Byfield.
Oh, you were there?
I was at that game. It was insane. That's cool. I was bowing to Rick Nash, and Coyotes fans wanted to fight me, and I'm like, I don't even like the Blue Jackets. I just thought that was an amazing goal. But that goal he scored, it's funny because both goals now, Rick Nash or both of them, Blue Jackets were involved. But yeah, that goal he scored, like alone, like we're going to see 55 in the rafters. Like I'm that confident in him being an all-time great player. And I totally agree with Joe here as far as like you want to try to lock up a player like that as early as you can. Or a problem with that, just given where the Kings are at right now, they really can't afford to do that. That's the only issue because, I mean, we're talking about value. Like, what was the value they got out of Pierre-Luc Dubois and his $8.5 million? Probably not that great. And you still have Kopitar. You still have Kopitar for 2 more years at his $7 million. Drew Doughty's still being paid with his $11 million per year deal. Yep. It's kind of hard to figure in another $8 million plus deal. So I think a bridge deal is just more likely, and it's going to hurt. I totally agree with that, especially where I think his progression is going to be his trajectory as far as being a top-line player for this team. It's going to hurt in 2 years, but I think it's just something that they're just going to have to deal with when the time comes. Hopefully the salary cap goes up a little bit more at that time. So that's why I think like a 2 by 5 is probably the most likely. Maybe you can get him at 3 years. I think I just checked. He hits UFA status at 2028. So I think you can do like a 3-year deal for maybe $5 million. So that gives you that extra third year, maybe help out a little bit, and then he'll be 24 at that time. So I think that's where you go with Byfield.
I also really push back on he's a product of Kopitar and Kempe. I don't know if there's anything to back that up statistically, because I think if you were to look at Byfield's numbers, his possession numbers and his expected goal numbers when he's on the ice with Kopitar and Kempe versus without, I think Byfield is stronger without those two than those two are without Byfield. I know that's not everything, but I really don't subscribe to that. So It's just I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No,
Randon, but
I totally agree. I mean, P.O. Dubois was better with Byfield. It wasn't the other way around.
Yeah.
I think Kopitar and Kempe were better with Byfield, and it wasn't. Byfield was better with them. It was.
Let's just put it this way. I'm looking at Money Puck, and I'm not narrowing down the minutes because this is kind of I think indicative of because he played up and down the lineup when the team needed him. So I'm not putting a minutes cap, but out of the top 10 in expected goal share for forward lines, Byfield's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the top 10 lines for expected goal share, regardless of minutes. So, I mean, he was moved around quite a bit last season. I think he plays a game on the boards that's needed on every single line. And I think, Chris, thank you for listening, but I think you're just being a little bit of a hater there.
Well, so Johnny, and I'm going to butcher the last name. So Johnny V, I'm not even going to try to say the last name, buddy. He says Christopher's out here trolling. He's an Oiler fan. Well, Christopher, I take offense to that. I was pulling for the Oilers last round, and I'm pulling for them again. So
yeah, see, people were upset with me when I wanted to see a Game 7. Joe's out here actively rooting for the Oilers. Yeah, everyone send your hate to Joe.
And still am. I am actively rooting for the
Which
Oilers.
I will say, like we Joe and I talked about this outside of the show. I like an Oilers Rangers Stanley Cup final would be the best for hockey.
And I don't know if either of them win their series, by the way.
Like as a non-biased,
I'm going Dallas, Florida. That's what I want.
As a non-biased Oiler hater, I've become like an Oilers Rangers Stanley Cup final would be so good for the league and hockey in general. So I'll just say
I agree.
No, so Joe, all the flaming bags of poop that have been on your porch the last couple of weeks, those are for me because you disgust me with your Edmonton.
Wait, you send him flaming bags of poop too?
Yeah.
All right. I love it. So Quentin Byfield. We'll show you guys here just a second. We'll get our tinfoil hats on. We haven't got to that part yet, so stay with us here. But let's keep rolling. We got to go to goaltender. Guys, we only have one goalie signed next year. What's going on here? Randy, you play goalie? Joe, you play goalie? I don't know.
I did play goalie a season in men's league once.
I can barely squat without pads, let alone with pads. So that's not going to be my forte.
Yeah, I can't really do the splits like Jonathan Quick, so that'd be tough. But hey, I wanted to bring up these are goalies that can play goalie. Last I checked, these are the unrestricted free agent goalies across the NHL for this season. I pulled up just the top 10. I feel like the Kings might be able to grab one of these if they're looking outside and not looking to bring back a Talbot, or I guess Talbot is one of them. But yeah, here's some more notable names that Evolving Hockey is predicted as far as their contract projections. I'll list the names for those that are listening. You have Jeremy Swayman, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Anthony Stolarz, Laurent Brossoit. Shout out to Jim Fox there. Ilya Samsonov, Cam Talbot, Alex Nedeljkovic, Scott Wedgwood, David Riddick, already back with the Kings. We don't have to worry about him. And Casey DeSmith. Casey DeSmith, he was with the Canucks, right, Joe?
Yep. Played in playoff.
Yeah.
Played okay.
He was with the Penguins before that. Am I wrong there?
That's correct.
He was.
That is correct.
Jeremy Swayman is the highest cap hit here. They're projecting 4 years, $6.2 million for Jeremy Swayman. I know a lot of Kings fans are pretty high on him. Yeah, see, Randon is one of them. So I think I started with Randon last time. Joe, any of these names stick out to you, and what do the numbers look like?
So real quick on Swayman and Luukkonen, I'm pretty sure, Russ, those are both RFAs.
They are. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are RFAs. But there are two names that stick out to me. In Anthony Stolarz and Laurent Brossoit. Both goalies I like quite a bit. Both goalies I think would be great fits, probably especially Anthony Stolarz. I just wrote a piece the other day kind of looking at a few goalies that they could go if they decided to move on from Talbot in the UFA market. Stolarz was one of them. He, among goaltenders that played at least 10 games, he was third in goals save above expected per 60 per Money Puck. He made $1.1 million last year. To Russ's, as you see here, for those that are watching, 3-year deal. I don't love the 3 by 3.3 Russ. I would love it if they can get him on a 2-year deal. That would be, I would love that, preferably to the 3-year deal. Brossoit, I'm a little surprised at how high Brossoit's cap hit is. He's never
Really?
made, yeah, like he's
He had
never
a good number. I think these are inflated by his numbers, right? With Winnipeg,
I-
they were great.
I guess, but like, and he to your point, he was like Stolarz was. I just mentioned he was third in goal saved but expected per money puck. Brossoit was fifth. Yeah, he had a very good season in Winnipeg. He was second in high danger save percentage just 2 seasons ago. He was in the top 20 this past year. And to your point with Winnipeg, he had a .927 save percentage. He's been a really good kind of number 2 backup goalie in the NHL, but there's nothing. He's never been a number 1, and he's never made. I don't know that he's made above $2.5 million. I'd just be surprised if he gets to $3 million, especially on a 3-year deal. That seems high for me, based on like if he was a starter. I don't know. Maybe. Or then again, I am
No
so
playoff experience for him either.
a little. I think he played a little bit.
Maybe for Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. The way I look at this though is Brossoit and Stolarz have, for the most part, been number 2s on their team. And how attractive does LA look if you're either of those guys? And I would include Casey DeSmith in this, although he's not a big target of mine. Nedeljkovic, same thing, not a big target of mine. But I also included in the piece Kevin Lankinen as a possibility. These guys have all been kind of number 2s, backups, whatever, and they're going to get an opportunity to play more than they've ever played in a season, probably in Los Angeles, just because they don't have money to sign a big name goalie. So I am very much interested in Stolarz and Brossoit. Hopefully they can get them at terms a little bit less than this. But even if it was Stolarz 3 by 3.47, you're still paying both your goalies, what, $4.5 million? That's a pretty good, that's still a good bit of business. I just have a hesitation committing 3 years to kind of journeyman goalies, for lack of a better term. So, but yeah, there's a couple of names there that I do find interesting.
Brandon,
So
what are your
real quick, and this is probably getting a little bit later, but the whole Swayman, Luukkonen, Ullmark thing, certainly trade options though. Like,
yeah.
You wonder what's going to happen with Pekka Luukkonen in Buffalo. Obviously, there's a situation in Boston with Swayman and Ullmark, so there are trade possibilities too.
I'll keep it brief because I want to wear my tin hat coming up here soon. Samsonov.
He's anxious.
Samsonov is mine. I think that he had a down season in Toronto, had a very good season the season before. I think you could probably get him for less than 2.6. He's still pretty young. So a 2 by 2 type deal for Samsonov would be kind of like where I would kind of target that kind of deal, because I believe that you're going to need the cap space for everything else. I'd rather have a cheaper goalie and have Byfield with a deeper contract, or get a defenseman than pay a little up for the goalie. So Samsonov's kind of the sweet spot for me.
I like Samsonov.
Yeah, I think if you're looking, you're looking for a starter here, right? Like Joe said, Brossoit, Stolarz, they haven't been starters before. I think Brossoit maybe started for Vegas for a little bit, but besides that, there's not much here as far as UFA options. I know Luukkonen and Swayman are RFAs, but Samsonov, yeah, I think that kind of piques my interest a little bit. Maybe 1 year, 2 deal at maybe $2 million per year, not crazy. But yeah, so those are the free agent goalies, and we'll see how they look on the roster, where we can fit them in just in a bit here. So we'll move on to the unrestricted free agent forwards that we might have our eyes on. And fellas, there's some really fun names I like here, and I'll just start off with one name in particular that I like from this list. We don't have to name them all, but the one second from the bottom there, that Dakota Joshua, the forward out of Vancouver, who I thought looked really good for the Canucks. Evolving Hockey here has him at 2 years, $2 million, just over $2 million. I think that is going to be a little bit higher. I could see it being 2 by 3, 2 by 3.5, maybe even offering him a 4 by 3.5. I'm really high on this player. I think he's a big guy. Can play up and down the lineup. Looked good playing top 6 minutes for Vancouver and was productive too. So if you're looking for a little bit of physicality, a little bit of skill, I think he brings all of this. So that's my guy from this list. Joe or Randon, is there anyone that you like? I think there's one player you like from this list. Is he on this list?
He's not on that list, so I'll save him for that next segment.
We'll save it for the next segment. Randon has one guy in mind. Joe, how about anybody on this list spike your interest at all?
I don't mind the Joshua shout. I'll just say, because Victor Arvidsson is on this list, and if the Kings do move on from Victor Arvidsson, one thing that we've talked at length about is there's no right shot players, there's no right shot forwards for the Kings, and one unrestricted free agent that is a creative player, but he's got a little bit of like chippiness to him too, which I think is welcome. I can see him fitting nice on a third line or in a middle six role, and capable of playing power play is David Perron. This contract has him at 1 by 2.4. I think that's attractive to me if they can do that. Again, if you lose Arvidsson, there's a right shot somewhere, and if that right shot isn't coming via a trade, is LaFerriere ready to take that big step? Are you going to put your eggs in the Akil Thomas basket as that creative right shot player? Because we talked about all season, Arvidsson finally brought a little bit of stability to the power play when they put a right shot there. Now, there's going to be different options. We'll see what the personnel looks like, but I think my target here for the forward group for the Kings is somebody, I echo Russ with a player of the ilk of Dakota Joshua, but I also want to find a creative right shot forward to play.
Patty King's right there, buddy. 1 by 2.4.
He's left shot. He's a lefty.
He's a lefty. Yeah.
So that's a name that jumps out to me is David Perron.
Yeah, I think all Kings fans are familiar with Perron's game. I'd say a player like that would immediately help the power play alone. If you're looking for like a guy who's going to muck it up down low near the net, I thought he was going to be the first guy to pick a fight with Jonathan Quick. It never really came to fruition, but we saw that happen plenty. So, yeah, these are just – obviously there's a longer list here. I thought this was like the range of where the Kings could go as far as free agents. I don't see them going big game hunting for like a Gensel or Stamkos or anything like that. That's not.
What about
happen.
the rise of Michael Amadio? Like people wanted him in the atmosphere, and he's scheduled to get a 4 by 3.2. So
yeah, good, yeah.
Which I think is very feasible with how he played. Obviously, he's a Cup champ with them. So Yakov Trenin is on here too. That's another interesting game. 4 by 3.3.
One thing with Joshua. Russ is I can see, because you said maybe it gets a little bit higher. I think they're maybe the good thing for Vancouver getting bounced is I think you could very much pay a playoff tax for a guy like Joshua. There's the style of play, the way he played in the playoffs. I agree. I think he was good, but I also think some of these guys get a tick overpaid because of a small, short sample playoff performance. I think Barbashev is an example of that. I think Zadorov's going to get massively overpaid too, based on these playoffs. So, but I do think a player like a Joshua is somebody the Kings could use.
Absolutely. So let's go into what the roster looks like right now, and we'll dive into Cap Friendly. The GM armchair GM feature.
Hold on, Russ. I'm not ready for this segment here.
Wait. Let's get it on. There we go.
All right, we're ready.
Brandon's got his tinfoil hat on, everybody. There we go. So, as you can see here, this is the Kings lineup with all the players that they have signed for next season. They have just over, and I added, so if you didn't see beforehand or you didn't notice, I added all the RFAs. So I signed Alex Turcotte and Akil Thomas to just $1 by $1 million deals. Could be 2 by 1. Who knows? I don't see it being higher than $1 million per year. So they just kind of went ahead and added those. And then Jordan Spence, I actually gave him a $1.75 million deal, I think, or it could be 2 years, but just for the sake of our little workshop here, 1.75. I feel like it's a good cushion to kind of work with here. But guys, we like you can see, we still have some names to figure out here. So I'll just start with the big one Quentin Byfield, and let me get to the Kings here. Bear with me here for a second. As I'm trying to pull this up, what contract are you guys thinking for Quentin Byfield here?
Do we want to? So if I'm Rob Blake, I would open the negotiations. Here's an 8-year deal for $7.5 million per. Do you think Byfield accepts that?
Okay.
And I guess maybe that could be perhaps an exercise that we can see how difficult it is to navigate the roster if we do go long term with Byfield. Do you want to go there, or do you want to try to be more practical?
I'll have to log back in real quick. Sorry, guys. Don't look at my pen. Brandon, what do you think? You think a bridge deal or a long-term deal?
Let's navigate the roster with what was the most likely, which was the bridge deal. Let's see what a bridge deal looks like and what kind of players people can add. Because I think if people it'll be harsh on a lot of people's brains if we do sign them long term, how quickly that cap gets sniped up for this season and what really that team could look like. I think if the team's trying to win now, a bridge deal benefits the team because it's a lower cap hit and you can bring somebody in. If it's what's best for the team overall is the long-term deal, but it hinders what the team can do this season. So I think let's go with the most likely, see what the team looks like with the bridge. I think a little bit more than what Evolving Hockey said. Let's do like a 3x4.2 or something like that. We think.
Yeah, I think that.
4.75.
Okay.
We'll split the difference. 4
years. And there we go. And there we go. So we signed Byfield to his bridge deal, and now they're at $11 million in cap space. Where should we go from here? Should we look for a goalie? Maybe we should look for a starting goalie.
Yeah.
Which goalie are you guys looking at?
I would sign Anthony Stolars. Or do you want to consider I don't know if you want to consider a trade, but I would sign Anthony Stolars. And for sake of consistency, we can go with the projection at 3.34 for 3 years for Stolars and see where this fits.
Let's do that. 3.34.
I think that's what it was.
We'll just do 1 year just to see what next year looks like, and we'll slot him in as the starting goalie. So what do we got here? We got
Cy saying pulling a trade, Gustafson and Rossi full tinfoil. That would be it. That would be
a deal.
That'd be full tinfoil right there.
That is full tinfoil. But so yeah, we signed Stolars 3.34, and now we have just under $8 million. And we have 2 forward spots to fill. Randon, I know we didn't get to your guy on the last slide, so let's bring him up now. Who is your big name that you're looking to bring in?
Yeah, I was teeing myself up with the bridge deal because this kind of leads into my guy here. So my guy is Tyler Bertuzzi. 80 games played, 43 points. But if you look at his picture, he's missing a tooth. He comes in right at the 4.7 mark. I think you probably could get him. He made 5.5 last year. 40 points at 4.7 is a little steep, but I think that he has other for the word that Joe hates, intangibles that are actually beneficial to this team. With being the forward group isn't as physical as I would like. That's why I like Tonka. I think Bertuzzi adds that, for lack of a better word, that rat mentality to the team. He can score goals, over 25 goals, multiple seasons. And I think that the grit that he plays with is going to be beneficial for that team. I think he would go well on a line with PLD, Fiala, and him would go on a line really well. I think he could play up on the first line if need be, if for injuries. He's 29, so a 3-year deal, as you're seeing here on Evolving Hockey, puts him at 32. Would he want a 5-year deal? At 5 by 6, I'm out because I think that's too long for me. If he's willing to go a shorter term deal, that really makes it something that I'm more interested in. I think he got the raise of what he looked at to go play at $5.5 million. I don't think he lived up to that. I think he's going to see a pay cut.
It was also only 1 year too, so you have to consider like that's 1 year deal.
Yeah.
You give a player term, that cap hit's going to come down with that term.
So I mean, it depends on where they value it. I think, and I think he was one of the players that was vocal about playing in a heavy market and how sometimes players want to play in a market that's a little bit more silent. I think he was one of those players, if I remember correctly. So he could go to a quieter market like LA on a playoff team, see top 6 minutes, and make around that $4.5 to $5 million per. And I think that it kind of just fills out that middle six there, gives them the grit that they need on the top 6 or the top 9, wherever you want to play them. He adds a lot of goal scoring depth. I know he's another left shot, but I think he brings something to the team that we don't have.
Yeah, I like Bertuzzi. I think that's exactly the kind of player I'm looking for, right? When I mentioned Dakota Joshua, I'm looking for a player with a little bit more physicality in the middle six, someone that's going to maybe pull a player like P.L. Dubois into these scrums and maybe kind of get him a little bit more involved in the game more physically, as opposed to just being a playmaker out there. I like it. Joe, you have any comments or thoughts on that player?
I don't like him quite as much as Randon does. I don't hate the player. I would prefer, again, the two of the forwards that we talked about before, Russ, Joshua, or Perron, that I think bring kind of that similar chippiness edge to their game. That I will agree that if we could add that in the forward group would be good. And I don't know why I can't get there with Bertuzzi. So I don't know. I would rather go a different direction.
Because you're a curmudgeon.
It's weird because he was like so good with Detroit, and then I feel like his name kind of lost a lot of notoriety when he got traded. Even though it was like he was really good with Boston, like really good in their playoff series.
Yeah, that you might be talking me back into it. That he was better.
Like if you're looking for like a playoff performer, like he's been there. He's done that. Like he's not really that great as far as he gets injured quite a bit too, which maybe hurts a little bit. But I mean, if you're looking for people that are going to perform in the playoffs, which the Kings obviously haven't, I like Randon in his tinfoil hat prediction there. He's our Jonah Hill to your Brad Pitt. So I'm rolling with it.
Okay.
Let's go. I'll go back to here. So I went ahead and gave Bertuzzi 4x5. What do you think there, Randon? You okay, Mr. Assistant GM?
Yeah, I mean we try to get it for cheaper than that, but yeah, 4x5 is a little.
I really don't like it at 4.5.
Joe's a little upset. You know what?
I'm a little upset.
Okay, let's do 4 by 4.5.
Yeah, I think it's more.
How's that? That's fair. All right. Don't fire me now, boys. Here we go. All right. So even if you kind of get if you look past the name, if you want to sign a player like Dakota Joshua, David Perron, you have about, just imagine like a $4.5 million player slotted in right here. That, I mean, this is where I feel like the Kings are going to make the biggest noise, as if they don't make any other changes. Where we'll talk about the defensive group here in just a second. But if they don't want to make any changes to the current roster as far as trades, I think they could probably make some noise here as far as a UFA forward. You can sign a player like at 4x5, and you still have just over $3.4 million in cap space to work with. Where this is where I feel like you see a player like Trevor Lewis or like a sub $1 million, $1.5 million player come in to kind of slot in on the bottom 6 here, because you're not going to find you're not going to sign a player at the $3 million cap hit, and then all of a sudden you don't have any flexibility that we had in this past year, right?
It's important to keep in mind too. Right now, Russ has 3 full lines, two players on the fourth line, and 6 defensemen. So there's a roster size of 19. You technically have space for 4 more guys. The right wing 4, and then 3 reserves. So we know the Kings are tight. They may not be able to go to the full 23-man roster, which, obviously they did that this year, which is why I would much rather try to sign a Joshua or a Perron for less than $4.5 million of Bertuzzi. And I think, to the point Russ is making, this is where somebody like a Trevor Lewis can make some quote unquote sense. That said, depending on what you can get for a Grundstrom on an RFA coming back, again, even Lizotte, because in this scenario, there's no Grundstrom or Blake Lizotte. And there's room for either of those to play fourth line with Turcotte and Akil Thomas, and I think be perfectly fine. So I would certainly rather go that direction, Russ, than Trevor Lewis. So I guess I don't know if you want to bring in, if you want to sign.
So I think if you look at this, where do they go higher dollar amount on the second line, if you will, or do they get a Perron, who's an older player, at like a 2 mil? Do they get and then maybe you could technically probably sign both Victor Arvidsson and a Perron for the same as you probably could a Bertuzzi.
That's the other thing. Like, what if you could possibly sign? Now, again, these are based off of the evolving hockey contract projections, which Lord knows. I mean, who knows how things go? Who knows if Perron even wants to sign out west? I don't know. He may not. But I just think he fits so much of what they need to from a skill standpoint, from a finishing standpoint, from a playmaking standpoint.
Nothing that some chloroform and a flight can't fix to get him out west,
He's got chippiness to him. And so, I think that's a really good shout, Brandon, that maybe it takes lucky, maybe it's threading the needle, and maybe this is very optimistic, but could you sign Arvidsson for 3.5 and sign Perron for 2.5? Is there room for that? And then you play the game with your 7th defenseman again, in your forwards, and you might have room for one extra player at that point, which again I know is not ideal, but this is what we're talking about from a forward standpoint. At least that's the direction I would like to go.
Here's an interesting name, and I'm glad Devo here brought it up on the chat. And if you guys have any players that you're curious about, go ahead and throw them out there. We'll bring them up. But he's wondering what Toffoli's market looks like, and lo and behold, here you go.
Yeah.
They have Tyler Toffoli at 3 years, $6.1 million, which that's a pretty big circle. It seems like they're pretty strong on the prediction there. What do you guys think about Toffoli at this cap hit? Because honestly, this doesn't seem like a lot for Toffoli.
He still scores. The kid, he's still productive. He's still a good player. I can totally see a team giving him this. I just don't see, because of the cap constraints, I don't see him fitting with Los Angeles. If he makes, I can definitely see him making maybe 5.5 or so at least. So I like the player. I just don't know that there's room to fit him in at the way things are currently.
I think it's very fair for Toffoli. Anthony, we got to give him, he's been stammering for the Stamkos right-hand shot. What is his projection looking at?
Yeah, let me bring just real quick. I'll make a comment on Toffoli. I would love to see if they could squeeze that in there. I just don't know. 6.1 mil.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite hefty. But even Stammer, let's see what this looks like. They're predicting 3 by 8.4.
Yeah.
How old is he? He's 34. I see that probably being like 4 years, 8.7. That looks a little bit better. maybe that's a little higher end. I think if he stays in Tampa, that's probably about $8 million. If he ends up leaving, I can see that being about 8.5, 8.7.
Yeah, and obviously you're not fitting that in.
Can't fit that in. But that one by 3.9, that's
there you go.
Remember Taylor Hall? Remember Taylor Hall did that 1 year deal with Buffalo that 1 year that was kind of a surprise to everybody, and that flopped.
It was like a prove it deal, and he's like, "Why are you going to Buffalo to prove it?"
Yep.
With the team they have there. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the more we go through this exercise, guys, the more like guys David Perron just seems to check a lot of boxes.
Hey, it sounds like our AGM Joe Paterino here really wants to.
I'm going to push for this. Yeah, I'm pushing for this.
Paperson is bringing his number. I'm pretty sure Paperson's actually his agent too, which is kind of surprising. It's kind of funny. I could. Be
let's go into Joe's down Joe's avenue here. Let's go Perron, and obviously Joe is the proponent of getting better on the back end. I know England is still signed, but it doesn't mean we have to have him as the sixth defenseman. What about signing Perron, having one of the rookies play right wing 4, and maybe getting a defenseman and having England play as the 7th? What kind of defensemen are
you want to take Andreas England out of the lineup? Are you kidding me? What happened?
His intangibles still play in the press box. So
the immeasurables are that immeasurable.
So what kind of cap hit do we have? We have 2 players that need to make 3.9. So what kind of defenseman? So we need to find a defenseman essentially for 2.9 million.
You have 2 players. You have 2 spots open to make 3.9, but that's more than that because you want to have. Although you have England as a scratch, so you would have 21 roster players. I know Joe has one name in mind. He's propped him up quite a bit. I wonder if we're on the same line of thinking here.
If it's a free agent, Russ, Brady Shea. I don't know if that's who you're thinking of, but he's much more bigger name and expensive. The name that I've brought up in the past a few times is Eric Gustafsson. Speaking of Eric Gustafsson, who's playing right now for the Rangers, well, not right this second, but still playing for the Rangers. What is his contract projection? Because this is a guy, when I go back to the signing of Englund for $1 million, when Eric Gustafsson makes less than Andreas Englund, and when you look at the production that Gustafsson had, it'll make you puke the fact that he makes less money. Okay, you know what? This is what he should be getting. 4x4 is where Cap Friendly has him at. I love that kind of 3x3.5 range is another option here. That would be
2 by 3.3 sounds really good. Maybe 2 years, $3 million.
Yeah. That'd be like a sweet spot if they could find a way to do something like that. Because talk about a guy who puck mover. They lost Adam Fox, and Eric Gustafsson was able to fill in at basically league minimum on their top power play unit and be really effective. This is a guy that can get you up and out of your zone. This is a good depth defenseman, good player. I like this. I like Eric Gustafsson. And when it comes to although he's not as inexpensive as he would have been this past year. Now, I don't know. I want to say he's always been on the East Coast. So I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want to go west either. That's guessing. But if there would be any interest in the player or the player to LA, boy, I'd like to find a way to make that work, because that's an easy way to upgrade the depth of your blue line by bringing in a guy like this. But again, at $4 million, it takes the sting away from the value.
Yeah, I think he's getting paid league minimum this year. $875,000.
Yeah, I think he's just above league
almost
minimum.
40 points.
Sickening.
Yeah.
Is there a player or a free agent that you think is going to go that's going to get underpaid for his value?
That's a good question, Randon. I mean, yes. It's just a matter of who, because it's so hard because in the early days of free agency, these guys probably get overpaid. And then as you get going later on, you probably have guys that end up getting underpaid.
Here's a list of free agent defense.
So yeah, Brady Shea is
big one.
I imagine this guy Brady Shea is probably he's got to be 6+ on a projection, Russ, from Evolving Hockey. If I had to guess,
I think he was 6.6 at
Okay.
5 years. I can bring it up. I had it before.
and he's a tricky one because he's 30. So if you're committing to a 5-year deal, that's something to consider.
Any interest in bringing Anthony Carrazzo asked the question, does Martinez find his way back? So any interest in bringing Martinez back, maybe a hometown discount, maybe $2 million a year?
I do have interest in that. I think he's a capable defenseman. So the caveat to that is we haven't really talked about it. We've kind of danced around it. Like so much of what they do on the back end is, do they do anything with Vladislav Gavrikov? Do they / can they? Because obviously he's got a no move clause. That is the question. And if they keep Gavrikov, which I would certainly say is the most likely scenario, then you have Anderson and you have Gavrikov. You only have so much room. We just laid it out with if you brought in even a guy like Perron at a decent contract, you're looking at, what did you say, $3.9 million to sign 2 guys. Like, even if you do get rid of Englund and bring in somebody, you probably can't sign Gustafsson. So that idea is out the window. So a Martinez could possibly fill that LD3 role. He would be a significant upgrade over Englund. Absolutely. So I am interested in that. I wouldn't say it's like my preference or that high on my list, but so much depends on Gavrikov. And if they're stuck with the 5.875, then they're stuck with it, and they're going to have to, find a cheap option to play LD3. Listen, Jacob Moverari is better than Andreas Englund, so I don't know how long we're going to play this game, but that's an easy one. You're
looking for value at that spot. I mean, as much as you can. It's not going to be. I know Devo's here saying, "Gentlemen, we need to get younger, not older." Wrong direction, which I totally agree. Yeah, you need to get younger in certain spots, but at that position where the Kings are at, you're really just looking for a player who's going to help out immediately.
And let's be honest, they are getting younger. Brant Clark is in the line. We have Brant Clark penciled in, Jordan Clark in the Turcotte penciled in, Akil Thomas penciled in. Like this lineup did get a lot younger. So if Martinez can play an LD3 role, then I think that's perfectly fine.
So let's tinfoil our hat up a little bit, because Brady Shea is your number one, right?
Yep.
If they can trade Gavrikov,
timeout. Brady Shea is not my number one. He's probably my number 2, but I could be. I'm now. He's my number 1 UFA.
Okay.
Oliver Shillington is probably my number 1, like, wish list target.
Really?
But I'm pretty sure he's an RFA.
No, I think he's a UFA. Yeah, he's right here.
Is he? Yeah. Give me Oliver Shillington. What's his projection from
2.5?
Oh, you're making me work here, Joe, and that's why I love you. Let me bring it up here. Oh, wow, you're going to love this.
There you go. There's your value.
Evolving Hockey is projecting Oliver Shillington at 1 year, $1.2 million.
Give me him.
2 years, 2.2, 3 years, 3.5. And I think that for those who don't know, Oliver Shillington went through a really bad injury. I don't know the specificity of the injury, but he didn't play for 2-3 years or something like that. I believe it was a hip issue or something. But he came back this past year.
All of 22-23, I think.
Yeah, came back this past year. I think it was the first season he was back. Played 33 games, finished with 8 points, 3 goals, 5 assists, but was a pretty high prospect, I believe, for Calgary before he got hurt, if I'm not mistaken, there, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a guy that just fits the mold of what I like, as he can skate so well. It moves the puck well. And, you're talking Russ the year before this. So he didn't play at all in 22-23. And in
60th overall by Calgary, 60th overall.
In 73 games in 21-22, he had 31 points. Just a really, really smoother skating defenseman that I'm just a big fan of. And if you get this guy and this is a situation where I would love to see them like even stretch it. Like I'd pay up a little bit. I'd pay a 2 to 3 year deal at 2x3 or 3x2.5, something along those lines. I mean, he won or was a nomination for Masterton.
He wasn't nominated, I believe.
Yeah.
Jacob, the goalie for Arizona, won the Masterton, I believe. I could be wrong.
Connor Ingram?
Connor Ingram. Did he win?
Did he? I honestly don't know who won, but I'm nearly certain that Shillington it was in that. And I don't know the likelihood that he leaves Calgary. I know he's a UFA. Calgary's got a lot going on, changes, don't know the direction they're going. He is 27 years old. Maybe they let him walk. Especially if you're getting this guy cheap, like you're getting in my opinion, a top 4 caliber defenseman that you're going to pay dirt cheap. And I think I think there's your value, to your point. Like from a value standpoint, he is so high on my list.
If he's betting on himself, he's more likely to do a 1 year deal.
Correct. And listen, I do think obviously Brady Shea today is a better player, but like if I'm looking from a value standpoint, I really like this kid. And I would love to see Los Angeles take a run at him if he does indeed hit the market.
Let's pencil him
in. You think 1 year, $2 million is not too high?
I'm a little surprised it's this low, but I guess he's coming off those injuries, and he really did have the one big year from like at least a production standpoint. He's had some injury history in the past, so but boy, that's like the breath of fresh air I just did, Russ, when I look at this top 6 defenseman and I see Shillington next to Brant Clark, like, this now we're cooking. We got David Perron,
keep it in your pants,
Shillington, and so you've signed David Perron and Oliver Shillington for $6 million. And so we're talking about here too.
I'm trying to do the God's work here, right? I'm only one man.
You're doing a hell of a job. Can you scroll up a little bit, because I wanted to see what's left with the cap. So it's 1.9
for 2 players.
Now I will say, if you wanted to get a little bit cheaper, you don't have to sign Stolars. You could go the cheap route again in net and put that 3.34.
Cam Talbot, right? You want even more flexibility. I mean, you give Cam Talbot a 1 year deal at $1 million, 2 year deal, $1 million per.
Yeah.
This is why
1.5.
This is kind of why I wanted to do this, because this is why I bring up a player like Cam Talbot and why I'm okay with bringing him back, because look how much flexibility you get to sign players like a David Perron or whatever. Even maybe you create flexibility to bring in a bigger name like Toffoli or something. You sign a goalie that you're familiar with, the team's familiar with, that performed well. Who knows if they're running the same system or not? That's going to help him out. But you get a goalie like Cam Talbot at $1 million. That's $2.3 million you saved by not signing a Stolars or Brussois or Samsonov or something like that. And that's
even a Samsonov at 2, even a Samsonov at 2.5, that's an extra $700K. And then you have 2.6 million. It gets you a little bit more, because even this though, right here, you at 1.9 left, and we're missing, for everybody not watching live, we have a forward spot and a bench spot that we want to finish. So forward spot, you could easily sign Grunstrom back for 1.1, 1.2, and then have a league minimum forward playing the extra. I think this shows what how the team benefits this year. This team got better this year by signing Byfield short term. Now, will the team be better short term if we sign him to an 8x7? Because then now you don't have a Perron and Oliver. You most likely have England in your last spot there.
You just won Joe over.
I mean,
I totally agree. Yeah,
it's a good point. It's a
You're
very
spot
good
on
point.
there. Yeah,
Now,
you want to create as much flexibility. You need to find value right now, and I mean it's going to hurt in a couple of years. But Byfield at a bridge deal is probably the best option right now.
Again, I think so much hinges on, and maybe I feel like I'm the only one that's really talking about the whole Gavrikov thing, and I want to be very, very clear. I will never pretend to be some sort of. I don't think we've ever pretended to be any. We're not insiders. We're just we analyze the team as best that we can. We're trying to find the best value that we can, and if there is a way to move off of Vladislav Gavrikov, this entire conversation changes because it opens up just an avenue that we didn't think would have existed. And at 1 year, 5.875, that's so much that could be opened up, but he has a no movement clause. So
are you willing to eat cap from Vladislav for one season to get him moved?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that depends. Like if you're telling me that if you move, like let's see, like I want to see, how about this? If eating a little bit of money meant Gavrikov out, Shillington plays, they sign Martinez, and you still have more money to sign another forward. I don't know what that looks like numbers wise. Thank you, Russ, for going through this exercise for me. I'm interested, but I just don't know. I don't think they would. I don't know if they'd have to eat money, but
who's a team that could use Gavrikov? I'm using my own little tinfoil hat right here. I'm making a trade. Ottawa, okay. And let's say they trade him for. He's probably going to be like a fourth round pick. He's not going to be anything crazy, right? Are we thinking for a second round pick? I don't see him having crazy value.
Does Ottawa really need him? Don't they have a bunch of lefties?
But I can see that they do, Brandon. You are right. But I think that they also, I think we're going to see some movement from Ottawa, perhaps that maybe they move on from. Could be.
I see what you're doing there, Joe. You just want to get Chikrin in the line. I see what
you're
doing.
That was not the route I was going, but if you want to go there.
I'm going to trade him
for all the fans' sake. For the last couple of years, we won't talk about Chikrin.
Just for the sake of our workshop, who cares what the trade is? But I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like with Gavrikov out of the lineup and how the salary cap looks like. So we made the trade for we traded Gavrikov. Gary Bettman's at the podium. We have a trade to announce. Gavrikov has been traded to the Ottawa Senators. The Kings have close to $8 million in cap space now. If you want to sign Mr. Brady Shea to his contract, which I'm pulling up as we speak, I'm vamping a little bit. They have him actually at 7 by 7.5 at Evolving Hockey
for a 30-year-old. I can't do that.
You can't. You're out. Joe's out. So let's make a deal. He's gone. He's gone door number 3 instead of door number 1. Randy, I'm guessing this might be too high for you too on the books.
Yeah, my tinfoil hat squeezing on my forehead with this number here.
That 3 by 6.5. If that's I see that on the board, I would do that. But like this is a guy that's either going to sign this deal early in free agency or he's going to be available in like September because he didn't end up getting the long-term deal that he thought he was going to get. He's going to sign for like a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm trying to look at other names. that are free agents. Like that's the thing is, there are not that many good.
No.
What do you think of Shane Gostisbehere?
I mean, Gosh Despair, again, you liked him at his value. I don't know. So here's the thing. I don't know that I consider him a top 4 defenseman, but you can talk me into a left side of Anderson, Shillington, Gosh Despair.
He's got to be cheaper than
No,
make last year
he's-
4.
Yeah,
He's probably going to be around a $4 million D man. I mean, he's productive. He can play with the man advantage, but
3 by 5.2 is what they have for Shane Gostisbehere, which is always weird. He's always been this. It's like you always see Gostisbehere play, and it's like, oh, guy can skate with a puck. He's always on a power play, and then he's like always got like a negative like 20 or whatnot. And it's like then he's on the ice for the other team scoring all the time. That's how he always is. He's like Sean Jersey times 2.
In his defense, he did play for Philly and Detroit. And didn't he play a little bit in Arizona too?
Finished with Carolina.
That's right. He did it. Yeah. He worked out well with them, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is a player that I like way better. I think you've squeezed. There's no value left to squeeze out at 3 by 5 on Gosh Despair. You know what I mean?
Because I think he was a $2 million defenseman on Arizona, or 2.5.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
He was on waivers, I think, a couple times, if I remember correctly, or one time in Arizona, and nobody claimed him. I think because of his contract. But Joe, I had to revert. It's not Pierre. Steve Stais. Steve Stais called. He wanted to get a return on that Gavrikov trade.
I'm sure he did.
So I think let's switch it up here because we're already at 2 hours and 15 minutes.
We're having too much fun here.
I didn't even realize that.
Let's delete it. As far as the signings that we have, let's change to what the team would look like with Byfield at a longer term. Because I think Byfield is the linchpin to how the season or how the contracts will shake up. Because I believe he's probably the number one option for the Kings.
Yeah. I'm going to leave Anthony Stolarz here, if that's okay with you. He already got his apartment. He's moved his stuff. I think it'd be kind of mean.
Well, I don't know how we're going to sign 3 players for $7.9 million if Byfield's getting 7.
You're right. You're right. Sorry, Anthony. You're out of here. Let's give our boy Quentin Byfield his due.
8 by 7 or whatever.
Yeah. You think $7 million?
At least 7.5, but sure.
All right. $7 million. You have $9 million in cap space for a goalie, and 2 forwards, with your defense of Anderson, Doughty, Gavrikov, Spence, Englund, Clark. So you have $9 million to fill 3 spots.
Okay, so go sign
Joshua
Talbot, or a goalie to a $2 million deal.
See, I really could see Talbot staying. And you want to create as much flexibility. And this is where you mentioned value, Randon. Like I feel like you get really good value with Talbot. And I'm not saying that Talbot's going to be your starting goalie for the playoffs. Come trade deadline, if someone's available, make a deal, make a move.
His cap hit number was 1. Yeah,
he may get an increase though, if we're being honest on that cap. He may get up to 1.5 to 2 million.
I'll do 2 by 1.5.
Okay,
does that sound right?
Sure. He's probably going to get an increase on this 1 million. So now we know Shillington. If we're going to go with Shillington being $2 million, let's sign Shillington.
Okay.
Bring him back into the fold.
And I think this is where the value in the forward position is going to get less, because you're not going to be able to get Perron. What about your boy Joshua for the projected $2 million that he was going to make?
So how much is you can
see?
sign?
I don't know if he's.
Go ahead.
I think he probably gets like 3.5 per year.
Okay, that's fine with that.
Just
Let's do
based
that.
like the playoff tax.
Yep.
The playoff tax that Joe mentioned, his performance in the playoffs. Where's he at?
Man, what was Perron's?
No. Perron was
We signed him for more than what Evolving Hockey thought.
Yeah, I thought we signed. It wasn't
4. We signed him for 4, but Evolving Hockey had him
4,
at 2.5, I think.
I'm trying to
But
find.
Can you just search him?
Sorry, guys. Oh yeah, you're right. Thanks, Joe.
You got it.
That's why we hired
And
him.
even still 3. Yeah, he may go less than that. He may go less than that. So okay, so they got $2 million to play with
21 players in the or with 20 players in the roster. That's actually not bad. So I can see Byfield getting that long-term deal.
The team's
You
less
just have to go
explosive in
really-
the short term, but you're going to have to get – you can't go
So-
for a major guy. You're going to have to try to get value from the
So-
other 2 positions.
So Brandon,
Yeah.
so the value is being baked in here. Like you need your big money guys, Byfield, Fiala, Kopitar, Dubois. You need them to be your big money guys. You're going to squeeze value out of Turcotte, Thomas. Hopefully, the 1 year of LaFerriere that got NHL games under his belt. Hopefully, that really helps him.
And then the values on the back end, too, like you said, Spence and Clark for
Spence, correct. Spence, Clark, Shillington are going to ooze value at those numbers. So, it's just and even looking this year, I referenced the Athletic, Dom Leschyshyn's value, his player cards and his market values. I think the only player that didn't meet or exceed expectations value-wise was Pierre-Luc Dubois this year. Everybody else was like
No way.
Believe it or not, was like right around where they were at. And you had a couple of players that far exceeded it.
Shake Master coming in here saying, do we think Joshua is a top 6 person? Well, obviously, Perron can play on the top 6, middle 6. Is Joshua that type of player?
I think so. I'm
don't
biased
know that
because I really like the player. I think Perron is a better top 6 option short term. But I think
Sure.
if you're looking for maybe a younger player that you could kind of develop with the team a little bit more, that's why I favor Joshua a little bit more. But I think their cap hit is probably about the same.
I think that's
So if
fair.
you're looking, I mean, it's either way, right? I mean, I love David Perron too. I mean, we all know the battles he's had with the Kings in the years past. So you can convince me either way. I just think you can get a little bit more as far as value long term with Dakota Joshua versus David Perron. But I do like Perron.
I don't want to go too crazy with the hand in this, but again, there's 2 right-hand shots in this lineup, in this forward group, and it's LaFerriere and Akil Thomas. So you're very much missing a righty in the top 6 still. So how much do the Kings want to address that? And I agree with a lot of what you say, Russ, with Joshua. My top UFA forward target is very much David Perron because I think he checks a lot of boxes, and I think he does bring a little bit of nastiness, chip on his shoulder type of, you know what I mean? So, shoot, I would love.
What if you get a discount on Perron and it's like what they said at 2.5 or 3?
I don't see that. I think he's got his playoff pedigree. He's going to want to win anywhere he goes. I see him getting at least
People who want to
3.5.
win people who want to win get discounts.
I wouldn't be surprised at 3.5.
Let's settle at that. We'll give him the Joshua deal. Same thing. Which I really like. I mean, look at that line. Fiala, Dubois, David Perron.
Oh, God.
That sounds fun.
So, and then I think LaFerriere, Deneau, and Moore on your third line is fantastic. And that fourth line, again, if Randon prefers Grunstrom, totally get it. I prefer Lazat. Either way, you can fit them under.
You also have Fagima.
There's also Fagimo and anybody else that may pop from the minors next season. So that gives the Kings 21 players. So again, it is still 2 players short. of the 23 that they would be allotted to have. And in this scenario, so sign whatever player for the fourth line, whether it's Lazard or Grunstrom or whoever it is. So that really wipes out whatever left the Kings have. So the Kings would be able to carry one extra player again, which we all know is not necessarily an ideal situation, but it is the situation that the Kings find themselves in right now.
They'll have one defenseman and one forward. I mean, Grunstrom at 1.2 or 1.3, which is what he was projected at.
Yeah, but I think that that's it. I think that's all they got room for, isn't it? Or no?
No, because we had 1.9, I thought.
Yeah, if you do Grunstrom at 1.3, you're stuck.
That's it.
7.75 is the league minimum.
Yeah, that's it. So you have no reserve forward, and you have one reserve defenseman.
Well, I mean, I think if you get Grunstrom at a cheaper deal, 1.25 or 1.1. I mean, he didn't really play.
So
you get a league minimum.
You could perhaps see Turcotte, Thomas, Grunstrom all come in under these numbers. Obviously, these are guesses, but at the same time, you could see Byfield get up to 7.5. So either way, you're kind of probably in the ballpark here, where I think I guess this is threading a needle and really being a very optimistic scenario. I think, Perron coming in, Shillington coming in. I think that would be great. If this was the lineup, I'm very excited. I really am. I would love the look of this. But
this lineup gets me really excited. So I'll just read through it, what we have right here. Quinn Byfield, Kopitar, Kempe, your first line. Second line, Kevin Fiala, Pierre-Luc Dubois, David Perron. Third line, Trevor Moore, Philip Deneau, Alex Laferriere. Fourth line, Alex Turcotte, Blake Lizotte, Akil Thomas. With your defenders are Mikey Anderson, Drew Doughty, Gavrikov, Spence, Shillington, Clark. Goalies are Cam Talbot, David Riddick. And your reserve, you have one reserve defenseman, which they ran most of the last year. I mean, you're losing a lot of flexibility, but I mean, it's really, if you're trying to make the most, and which I feel like to be honest with you, the biggest value you're getting out of this entire lineup is getting Quentin Byfield in his 8-year deal at $7 million. Because 3 or 4 years from now, when he's scoring at the pace we expect him to score, it's going to look like nothing. And then you're going to really find value to sign a Draisaitl or something. I'm just saying, like, you're going to find value elsewhere once the salary cap starts going up.
It's just going to be interesting to see how Rob Blake views this team, because he's going to want to win, and they're built to win now. Fans are expecting them to win. So is he going to sacrifice Byfield's long-term deal, which he possibly could get out? I mean, because what if it's 8 or 8.5 mil? Then you're talking about really handicapping your team this year to where you're probably not signing Perron. So then he's off. Then you're having Laferriere probably or Trevor Moore playing top 6 minutes, and then your bottom 6 is a little weaker. You're not getting Oliver at 2. You're probably playing Andres Englund. So, like, I really think I think the offseason is going to come down to Quentin Byfield's contract and where the team wants to maneuver.
And I'll say this too: what we've seen Rob Blake historically is he's been somebody that makes trades. He will make trades in the summer. This roster that we just put out does not make a single trade. That would surprise me. Now, I don't know if that trade's for a goalie. I don't know if that trade is some other situation. I don't think Arthur Kaliev's going to be here. So maybe that's but I wouldn't be like, we are not factoring in large part because you don't know what other organizations are looking to do, and guys are under contract, but you don't know what the targets are from a trade standpoint. And that throws a whole other wrinkle in. But I think what we've shown here is that becomes very difficult because they don't really have the room to take on a contract much more than a couple $1 million. Like, even if we didn't sign Perron here, you're only looking to acquire a player that's making roughly $3 million. That's tough to you know,
What are you getting?
where is that guy in a trade that's going to fit what you're looking for? So we'll see. I mean, this has been a fun exercise, but what's you know, it's crazy that it can go in so many different directions with just one single move, depending on what Rob Blake decides to do this season. But consider me excited about an Oliver Shillington Brant Clark pairing.
I mean, I didn't make any trades really because I think it's kind of difficult because
Yeah,
I don't know if it'd be tough for the fan base or I guess me myself just to get behind Rob Blake trading like future assets for like whoever. I mean, it all depends, right? I mean, the player in return, but Pierre-Luc Dubois has kind of scarred a lot of people. And you look at the players that are on the roster now. There's a lot of no movement clauses. You can see it here. Kevin Fiala, Kopitar, Kempe, modified no trades, Dubois, Deneau. All these players have no movement clauses, no trade clauses. Trevor Moore is really the only notable name that has no restrictions. And,
interesting player, by the way. That
which I mean, I could see that being discussed. You maybe sell high on him with his 30-goal season. But as far as that, besides that, I just don't see a lot of moves being made as far as players going out to create space. Whether they want to bring in players with low cap hits is another story.
So you don't think that they're going to do like a Gavrikov and a first for a Roman Yossi type trade?
No, I don't. As much as I would love that. God, I would love Yossi on this team.
Just throwing a couple other things out there for the hell of it before we end up wrapping up. Marty Necas in Carolina, his name has kind of been floating around the rumor mill. Hell of a player. I don't know what his contract projection is because I think he's an RFA. Incredibly good player, checks a lot of boxes, right shot, high skill, first line caliber player. I don't know that the acquisition cost of a player like him is going to be way too expensive, so I don't think the Kings would be really in on that, but Marty Necas, the player.
He's 25, and he's making $3 million this year.
Man, I wonder, like, our 10
right?
We're having fun here. But, I mean, like, if you're looking at trading, like, a Trevor Moore and more for Marty Necas, I mean, you're going to have to squeeze a little bit more. But you're starting riots. But I agree, though. Like, I love Marty Necas. He's
so
big
good.
Body, skill, everything.
I mean, you're probably talking a first – to your point, maybe Trevor Moore and a prospect. You know, are you including Pinelli in that, or Chromiak? Like you're probably that's
which I could see. Like Carolina's going to have to start clearing some stuff out if they want to re-sign. They have a lot of free agents. I feel like Shea's one.
Pesce.
Who said that he wants to come back? Pesce's the other one. I think they were a pair together too.
Yep.
Yeah, and they want to come back. I think Slavin's going to be UFA, not this year, but next year, which I would sign me up for Jacob Slavin if he becomes available because I freaking love that guy. But yeah, it would be interesting to see what they do with Marty Necas. I think they saw someone that they might be.
It's probably going to be it's probably a topper. It'll probably be a higher prospect, Joe. I was just thinking than Pinelli. Would you do Trevor Moore, a first, and LaFerriere? Would
I do it? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're thinking higher than that. I mean, you're probably looking at like a Turcotte. I don't know if he's higher.
Yeah, that's the thing is you don't know how some of these guys, but like yes is the answer to almost any of them that's not named Clark or Spence. But
they're probably for Spence. They might be asked for Spence, especially if Pesce walks. Spence is probably a player that they're looking at.
Yeah. So would you give Clark or Spence up for Necas?
I mean, that would have been so much easier to do if they had one of their 15 right shot defensemen still in the organization that they used to have. I mean, this dude is the real deal. So it's hard for me to say no to that. I don't know. But with how bad
make his PLD and Fiala.
With how bad the Kings blue line is, to take one of the few bright spots out of it, and Spence or Clark would be detrimental.
What does Sean Walker get?
That's a good question.
Because if you trade away a Clark or a Spence to get, and the only way you're doing that is to get a player of his caliber, then
hey, everybody laughed at us when we brought up Sean Walker, and not my Walker became a brief hashtag. The dude was underrated here. He was underrated here, and he
got thrown under the bus for his playoff performance in Colorado.
Yeah, he kind of had a rough playoff, but he looked pretty good, I thought, which was kind of strange because every time I watched the Colorado game, I was like, "Oh, Sean Walker, he looks pretty good." I think he was just paired with Jack Johnson a couple times.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's an underrated player.
I think the only way you're getting Nikias is if you have to give a top prospect for that.
Yep.
You're probably giving up a Spence and a first for Natchez for sure, and Trevor Moore, which would be an interesting conversation. And I don't know if a lot of people would be on board with trading away Trevor Moore after the PLD trade last year. I think, but Natchez is a different animal. I agree.
Yeah, like he's star potential.
All right, guys. Well, dude, we've been going out 2.5 hours.
I think we're still 50 strong in the chat. So thank you guys for bearing with us. I know you guys love doing this. We're going to continue doing that. Starting next week, we're going to start our a little bit about the prospects. We're going to see what the prospect pool looks like, where they could fill some holes, and we're going to start going over some of the prospects available at 21. We're also going to be covering any news coming up. If they make any signs, so say they sign a Quentin Byfield, we'll do another tinfoil hat session with some actual numbers and see what goes on as things drop. Appreciate you guys. Please hit that like button on the way out. For all of our articles, go to hockeyroyalty.com. Please follow us at hockey_royalty, at Random Commando 24, at JW Panorino NHL Russell. And for all your rain news, Kubatar for HOF. We do have a signing, Antu Jampson. Somebody asked about that earlier. We'll get to that in the prospect because he'll be filling in that in the rain next season. It's going to be an interesting offseason. Lots of stuff going on. The next wonderment or question marks being fielded is in the press conference tomorrow. Russ, I look forward to hearing everything from that. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Thank you guys so much. And as always, on this podcast, go Kings go.